Mattel Electronics presents Bomb Squad. They'll never do it in time.
The code. Figure out the code.
Are you sure?
Oh no.
Intellivision.
Introducing Mattel Electronics Intellivision. Inside is a powerful 16-bit microprocessor, a full range of realistic sound effects including three-part harmony music, a broad color palette, and an extraordinarily high level of resolution.
This is Intellivision. You're listening to the Intellivisionaries.
Welcome to the Intellivisionaries podcast. This is episode 5. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope you had a good holiday Christmas break. It's good to be back. Yes, that's right. You didn't get rid of us. We are still here, tormenting you with our Intellivision talk. Anyway, this is going to be a good show today. We have a couple of great interviews in this episode. One of them is with Tommy Tallarico. He is a video game composer and creator of the Video Games Live concert series. He's also a big Intellivision fan. And we have an interview with Keith Robinson of Intellivision Productions, former Blue Sky Ranger, Mattel Electronics, and another Mattel Electronics veteran, Joey Silvian. He was involved with all of the Intellivoice games, recording and production and coming up with game concepts. And he was also involved in a lot of the original keyboard component software. And finally, last but not least, we will be reviewing the game Bomb Squad this episode. Fond memories of this one. Got it back in Christmas of '82 when I got my Intellivoice, and I still enjoy it today. Not to give away my review. So, speaking of Christmas, what'd you guys do over the break?
Yeah, I tried. I gave it a good try, but I tried to make some time to play some Intellivision over the break, and I wanted to try to go through some of the 2013 releases, the new games. And I got to say, I put some time in on Paddle Party, and mainly because my 4-year-old just loves it. He loves the air hockey. And he likes the Pong, so, which it's such a simple game, but he's always trying to put a spin on it. When if you get the thing spinning, it gets these little sparklies around it, and he gets real excited to spin it. And of course, it curves as it moves when it's got the spin on it and stuff. So and the other one, where you got the little bumper car type things, and you're trying to play this squash game. Yeah,
where you're kind of knocking the other guy out of the way, and
yeah, he loves that because he can just ram into me, ram into my thing. He just laughs and laughs. So it's a really fun game. It really reminded me of the feeling I get playing Triple Action with my brother when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't played with my 4-year-old yet, but I think I will now that you've told me that, because I think that's the kind of thing that he could at least grasp and get into and enjoy a little bit more than some of the complex games.
That's really the only one I dug into as much as I wanted to. I tried to do a little bit of tennis, the new tennis game. I never had the original tennis, so it's hard to compare it. But I think I probably only got about 10 minutes into it, and then I had to go do something else, and then didn't get back to it. But
yeah, I haven't tried that one yet, actually. I didn't get a whole lot of time to do a lot of Intellivision gaming over the break because I was putting a MAME cabinet together for
nice.
One of my customers. I'm in IT with the computer repair business, but I do MAME and arcade stuff on the side not really on the side. It's kind of a small part of my business. So I was trying to get it to him before Christmas because he was going to surprise his 2 sons with it, but ended up being New Year's Eve day that we finally delivered it to him. Yeah, I posted some things on Facebook about it on my personal Facebook page, but Yeah, that was taking up a lot of my time during that break.
I'll have to share some of your ideas there. I've built a main cab myself, and I don't know. I kind of did some things I think are semi-unique about it, but that'd be a fun discussion sometime.
Yeah,
I'd love to build one, but I just don't have the room around here to do it.
This one it's not too large. It's like an old Tato style cabinet, so it's full size, but it's smaller than a lot of the cabinets that you'd probably think of.
Still very cool.
Yeah, didn't you build one, Rick, with interchangeable control panels?
Yeah, mine. You can pop the panels on and off with these just like spring-loaded clasp things that a buddy of mine found in like a hardware, some hardware catalog. He's like, "Oh, these things are great." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do that." So yeah, they can swap the panels to have different control schemes for the different games. I've made 7 different panels for it so far, and I've got ideas in my head to make 2 more, but I haven't put time into it.
And what did you have, like a Molex connector for the wiring for each one or something?
Something like that. I ended up using an old style it's a 50-pin connector. Mm-hmm. It's an old style telephone connector of some sort. It just I just called up. There's a local company here in Pittsburgh called Black Box that does custom cables, and I called them up and I said, "Hey, I need something that's got something." And I was actually thinking something on the order of 50 pins. Because I had already charted out all the different things I wanted to possibly connect from a panel to the system, and the guy said, "Well, we have this old 50-pin. It's for older phone systems. We don't get much call for it anymore, but we got it right in stock, and so it was cheap and it was easy to do."
Huh. Yeah, we have to talk more about that. This is not the Arcade Meme Podcast with Rick and Paul.
Build your meme cabinet.
And background commentary by Will. Yes, there is actually an Arcade and Meme podcast that started not too long ago. I think they only did a couple episodes. Don't know what happened to that. But yeah, that's pretty cool. We need to have a little discussion about that. And I'm sure people listening, some of you are also into arcade gaming and MAME and that sort of thing. We're all into these retro games. We don't discriminate here on the Intellivisionaries.
I think I've mentioned it before, but one of the things I've definitely done a lot of is trying to play Intellivision games on my MAME cab. And I actually have a page on my website about configuring that and decisions I had made. And of course, there's a whole class of games, Bomb Squad being one of that class, that doesn't map very well to an arcade cabinet. But a lot of the action type games play pretty well in there.
Yeah, I know I've looked at a lot of the stuff on your site. I know we linked to it from the Intellivisionaries homepage, but why don't you give that out on the show, Rick, your site, in case anyone wants to check that out? Sure,
yeah. It's a personal blog site, so there's a lot of stuff that my wife's written about our kids and stuff on there too, but it's www.rickandviv.net, and there's a navigation bar at the top, and there's an Intellivision button there that takes you to the stuff I've done there.
We'll put that in the show notes too, the direct link to the Intellivision section, unless you want to read about Rick's kids.
Yeah. And honestly, we haven't done much updating of late, so
I don't think our listeners want to read about my kids or anything, but you never know. So it's there if you want it. What about you, Will?
During Christmas, my wife and I went up to Maine to go visit my family. And we had a good time up there. Got to see my brother again, my parents, my Nana. My cousins live right next door, so they came over and we visited with them. Rest of the time during Christmas, I was working, doing a lot of hours overnight. Just last week, I added Tropical Trouble to my games. So now I have a boxed copy of Tropical Trouble.
Nice. Played that one a lot as a kid.
That's not one I had, but I have played it some, as an adult again. It's pretty cool. It'd be interesting if and when we can get to that one.
Yeah, I remember liking the game. It does get repetitive, but good graphics.
Yeah, I knew of it, but had just never really seen much footage or pictures of it.
It seemed like the illegitimate sequel to Beauty and the Beast, the same character,
yeah.
but it really, I don't think it was.
I think it probably was. I'd have to look to see if the character names were the same, but it looked like it was the same characters.
Yeah, the graphics are very similar, if not identical. Yeah.
But Tropical Trouble was not the same programmer as Beauty and the Beast. That was Wendell Brown, and Tropical Trouble was Steve DeFrisco. But
okay.
maybe they shared some graphic routines or something on that.
They might have, because it looked like it was the same sprite.
Mm-hmm. So, Will, when you mentioned your brother, did you play any Intellivision with him back when you were little?
Yeah, we played Triple Action and a few other games. Can't remember offhand. Oh, SNAFU was another one we also played.
You didn't get any Intellivisioning in during the break, though?
No, I didn't bring the system up with me. I did get the episodes of the podcast onto my mom's phone, though, so she could listen to the show. She asked me how to get it, so she asked me to get the episodes, so I put them on there.
18 hours of the Intellivisionaries podcast. Merry Christmas, Mom.
I think I can say with pretty strong certainty, my mother has never heard the show.
It's funny. My mom listened to some of it. She just doesn't really get the whole concept. She vaguely remembers the Intellivision. She's like, yeah, you kids played with games. I remember that. But she had some friend over, and it's like she still thinks I'm like 8, right? She's like, oh, look at what Paul did. And she's like, she's trying to show them the podcast. And apparently she pulled up the music only episode, and she's like, I know they talk in here somewhere.
Oh, no.
So awesome.
My mother actually did play a little bit on Lock and Chase. But yeah, she didn't have a lot of interest in it. And I know my dad's given a listen to an episode or two, but I'd be surprised if my mom has.
Yeah, the only thing my mom enjoyed playing that I remember was the Smurfs Rescue in Gargamel's Castle on the ColecoVision.
There you go.
But that's for the ColecoVisions podcast.
Hey, that's in our news segment.
Whoa. I've jumped ahead, guys. Sorry. Back up.
You know what they say. The longer your favorite retro gaming podcast, the longer your... And it doesn't get any longer than Retro Gaming Roundup.
Let's talk a little bit about we've been getting some feedback from the usual sources, Facebook and email and the forums and such. People seem to enjoy the Christmas show that we put out. Had a lot of fun with the little outtakes at the end and with all the Christmassy kind of themed stuff.
I wanted to talk about, let's see here. I sent to Sean at Throwback Reviews, I sent him a box of Intellivision games. Mainly because he posted a picture. I can't even remember now. It's been a while, but he posted a picture that, hey, I got a friend had given him a Intellivision, and he said, now I got to get some games. And I just kind of messaged him on Twitter and said, I've got a bunch of duplicate commons. You interested? And he's like, sure, I'd love that. So, and of course, as goes these things, some weeks passed, and I finally went down and kind of culled through a bunch of stuff, and I tried to give him games that, again, are either kind of indicative of the platform or maybe had something interesting. Like I sent him Demon Attack because Demon Attack on Intellivision has that nice mothership stage, and just kind of stuff like that. I didn't even make a list of what I sent him, but just some stuff, and boxed it all up and sent it to him. So apparently at the same time or around the same time, Rob O'Hara, Flack, sent him a bunch of Atari cartridges, and so he ended up getting like these two boxes really close together. And he posted a picture of them. It's like, wow, it's it's Christmas here, So on their Christmas show, they talked about this, and he said some nice things about the Intellivisionaries sending him something nice. And then Rob O'Hara said he's going to have to step up his game on the next care package because he said the Intellivision stuff I sent looked so pristine compared to the Atari cartridges he had sent. He said he thought that one of the cartridges had like a homemade label on it from his stuff.
Classy.
And, here I am sending. I tried to send him full boxed, with manual and whatever another. For what I had, it just happened to be what I had laying around. But I wondered if that was.
Rick has an entire room of spare Intellivision games, by the way.
That is not true. But
send me a diner.
So, but anyway, I wondered if you guys have found this to be true that in general do you find Intellivision games with box and manual kind of in better shape in general than than particularly Atari? Just I don't know. It seems like we Intellivision people held on to that stuff.
I think so. I mean, especially when the thrift stores and things were more prevalent with retro gaming stuff, I used to find that all the time. And they would usually be grouped with several Intellivision games, and you'd find all sorts of loose Atari 2600 games. So
yeah. I mean, you certainly see loose Intellivision stuff on eBay, but I just wondered. I have a subjective idea that the Intellivision stuff ages better just because the owners. It was a more expensive system, and they just kept their stuff for longer periods of time.
You're just trying to say that we were better than the Atari people. I know.
We were always better. That is true.
I think the gatefold boxes helped because I think people were able to keep their games more well protected, and they basically took better care of those particular types of boxes.
Yeah.
You needed to hang on to those overlays somewhere.
True. Yeah, I had overlays to deal with.
I have some boxes for the system that aren't in gatefold. Some of those are just beat up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like the box for Donkey Kong. Every copy of Donkey Kong I got is beat up.
Well, that's not really a box or a game you need, actually, in your collection.
For the collection, yes, I do.
Unless you're talking about the Electronite re-release, but,
Yeah, that one's in a nice box.
So in that same episode of Throwback Reviews, they were just talking about old stuff they remembered. It was a Christmas episode, and they were just, reminiscing. That's the word I couldn't get. And they talked about the old show, The Battle of the Network Stars. Mm-hmm. And Flack said he was going to have to organize from all the people on the Throwback Network a Battle of the Podcast Stars for some time in 2014. And he mentioned us as people that would be compelled to compete in these games. So I thought, well, all right, man, bring it to us here.
Yeah, why not?
Challenge accepted.
All right, let's do it. I can fall over just as well as the other guy.
Oh, yeah. I'm very good at that, too.
Well, we had some feedback from a guy on Facebook very recently, a guy named French gentleman, Philippe Laurence. I'm assuming that's the pronunciation of his last name based on my vast knowledge of high school French. He has a website called intvpixels.com. and it's some what I'm guessing are extremely high resolution, clear, perhaps cleaned up scans of boxes and game screenshots. Very nicely done. I mean, if you need to, you want to see what a box looks like or the some of the screens, check this site out. I know it's still in the works. I believe he doesn't have an entire collection of all the games, but very nice. We'll put the links in the show notes for that. Thanks, Philippe.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, they're really clear. I don't know. Like you said, there's at least been cleanup done. If not cleanup, then they look like they've been completely re-rendered somehow. They're really nice.
So DZ over on the Game Gavel forums had a correction on our review of Christmas Carol. When you get the snowflake, the snowman doesn't go directly away from you. He goes towards the ghost, which, I didn't really notice.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's there. Yeah.
I was complaining in the thread there how much the ghost is the bane of my existence in that game, and he was kindly popping in and with some. Well, here's some ways you can try to mitigate the ghost, and one of the things he mentioned was that we had gotten that wrong. So when you hit that snowflake, it's not that he's trying to run away from you particularly; it's just that he's targeting the ghost. And I'd actually noticed that in some of my gaming. I'm like, I got the snowflake. Why is this thing still on top of me? It's because the ghost was nearby, and So
I blame the Reynolds research department on that error.
Well, they're working overtime, but they are what they are. So there's only so much incompetence and cram into that. So.
I'll have to keep an eye out on that next time I'm playing.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I mean, again, that's kind of I like that. That's an interesting design choice, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think you're trying to stay away from the ghost too, so it just appears that he's going away from you because you're going away from the ghost.
Yeah. So we've mentioned No Quarter podcast on the show before. It's definitely a great podcast. I've been listening to it. So they gave us a mention, which was very cool. Apparently, Carrington had an Intellivision growing up, and at some point in the recent past had considered I should do an Intellivision podcast, and then he found us, and it just did some nice things, and we're doing a good job. Then they got into their regular scheduled content, but it was nice to be mentioned over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, guys. I enjoy your show a lot. I'm an arcade collector, as you all know. So it's fun to listen to your interpretations of all the stuff and the fact that you're playing it on MAME. So I can go ahead and follow up and do the same games as you if I've never heard of a game before. Of course, granted, you're playing a lot of the games that we all know and love, but you certainly throw a few in there that are lesser known.
Yeah, they've definitely done some I hadn't heard of. So yeah, it's a good show. And I noticed I don't know how to describe this. I found as I was poking around the internets a demo of a game for the ZX Spectrum called Jetpack, or not a demo, like a YouTube video. There's a ZX Spectrum game called Jetpack, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's Rocketeer. So looks like the Rocketeer homebrew, the Groovy Bee that we talked about a couple episodes back, the Groovy Bee's working on at the moment is basically a port of this Jetpack game, which is cool. I have no problem with that, but it was just something I didn't know before.
Yeah, I'd actually heard that, and I wasn't familiar with the Spectrum game, but I did hear somebody mention that. But I mean that's kind of what a lot of the homebrew guys do, right? They take kind of an older IP or idea and kind of embellish it and change it around. Still, what's going on with that game? Any word on a possible release date?
I've not seen anything. I think every so often somebody pokes that thread and says, "Hey, any updates?" And but it's not been very active lately. So
we got some other feedback, Facebook and email. Just a couple things here. A guy named Greg Miller on Facebook contacted us and says he'd love it if we would cover the D&D or sports games soon. And that is certainly on the agenda. I don't know exactly which sports game or which D&D game we'll cover, but that is something that we will get to soon. And we also received an email from a guy who goes by the name Steve C. He said some kind words about the show. We appreciate that, Steve. He's also wondering if we could dedicate part of an episode to covering Intellivision development in 2014. He kind of wants to spend some free time working on some of his own ideas. I don't know what level he's at when it comes to programming for the Intellivision, but he says that like the biggest barrier that he's found is that simply getting everything he needs to code and finding out what he needs to know. And he says if we can help him out in that way, or others that want to develop games for the Intellivision, it would be great. So we will put something together with that. We've actually been talking about a little bit about that ourselves already. Rick had some ideas about that, and Rick was toying around with a game himself, actually.
Yeah, it's been a dream of mine to program this system that I grew up with, and there is, if you go to I think it's wiki.intellivision.us is kind of like the official Intellivision wiki. And there's definitely a development section in there, and there's actually a lot of good documentation in there. But it's a wiki, so you have to kind of know what you're looking for, when you're searching. But there is a tutorial section there, and I actually wrote up a tutorial on how to take the Hello World example and convert that into the very basic tag along Todd example that you see, like everybody I've ever heard of that started playing with Intellivision trying to learn how to use it said, well, I started with the code and tag along Todd and then I started doing this and this, and I just eventually got where it got. And I kept trying to do that, and I couldn't make heads or tails of tag along Todd. so I thought, I'm going to learn this dumb thing, darn it. So I started asking all the really stupid questions on the Intellivision programming list, and worked up a tutorial that takes you through 5 steps to understanding everything that's going on in that game. And then since then, I've been actually working on an arcade port, basically, just because it's a game I've always wanted. I don't want to say on the podcast, I don't want someone stealing my thunder or anything, but it's definitely something I've worked on. It's a
port of Strawberry Shortcake from the 2600.
I loved that game. I have no idea, but I've got it to where it's drawing a background and it's moving a character. So there's things happening. So I feel like that's something we could at least talk about with some degree of slight expertise. But the people who really know that stuff, there's a mailing list for that called INTV Prague. It's on Yahoo mailing list. I've been on that for years, just kind of lurking and reading things as they go by. And you can always tell when someone's getting into something, like that there might be a new homebrew coming out of that community, because you'll see the same person asking ridiculously specific questions.
Yeah, isn't that where DZ got started when he was doing Christmas Carol?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Valuable resource.
So yeah, I would love to get into. I could definitely at least give you the high level ideas of how a television game is structured and some of the concerns you have and stuff like that, which would be I think interesting to talk about. So
yeah, and we've got some connections with some people who are knowledgeable about these things. So we'll try to put together, if not an entire show, maybe several segments spread out over shows, or maybe we will dedicate an entire show to it. But good idea. Thanks for the suggestion.
You're tuned in to the Intellivisionaries. Don't stop. It's the Intellivisionaries.
All right, so you want to talk some Intellivision news? What news there might be?
Yes, let's discuss the news of Intellivision.
The news for the 1979 platform.
Yes, breaking news.
Exactly.
Last month's show, while we were talking about Christmas Carol versus the Ghost Christmas Presents, we mentioned the contest going on over at carolversusghost.com. And the results are in on that. The new world's record actually...
Rick Reynolds. No?
Surprisingly, no.
No. The score display was rolled over twice with a score of 23,205.
I can't even fathom that.
That's crazy.
I can't either. That's a fraction of what I got. I got just over 1,000 for mine.
So the top, the name is Liduario, Liduario.
You know what? That's the guy that I pointed to the video in the last episode of a YouTube video of how to play the game.
Oh, cool.
Seems like he knows what he's doing.
I guess so. He made it look easy on the video. So, hey, congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah, rolling it over twice, that puts him at... the world record. I don't think anybody had rolled it over twice before this.
So he gets a custom version of the game, huh?
Indeed.
Yeah, I think they're doing... Did he promise that again this year?
Yeah, we talked about that last episode.
I am so forgetting what we talked about.
You listen to the show, Rick?
Yeah, he had...
You know, it is on iTunes. It's readily available.
I'll have to get a link or something so I can listen to the show. So there's a yet another new homebrew kind of announced Announce not the quite the white heck is not quite the right word. Man, that's tougher to say than it sounds.
Not quite the right word.
It's not quite the right word. Easy for you, not so much for me. So new homebrew with the name Space Raid. And the announcement was really just like, hey, I'm working on this. Here's a screenshot. The guy specifically said, please don't ask me about how I'm going to publish this or anything like that. And it very much looks like a Zaxxon remake. So it's kind of a cool couple shots there, and neat to see somebody working on something.
Was the second post in the thread, what is the box going to look like?
They do like to talk boxes over there, don't they?
Pretty much. Yeah, that's an Atari Age thread. I've not actually read that, but yeah, any time there's an announcement of a new game in development, it's cool, and we want to talk about it, and hopefully that will come to fruition sometime in the future. But we'll have the link in the show notes to that one. Looks like a Zaxxon remake, huh?
Yeah, interesting. So Rev, Revolutionika, Rev over there on Atari Age, he put a link in there to his IntellivisionRevolution.com website. He's trying to put together a page there all about the Tutor Vision. And he's putting out a plea to the communities. Anybody got any information, any more stuff about the Tutor Vision? And boy, we could on this show probably do a 3-minute segment on the Tutor Vision. Well, there's not much known about that thing.
I don't know if... later in the show, we will have Keith Robinson on and Joey Silvian, who was responsible for, directed the recordings for all the Intellivoice games. I'm sure Keith Robinson knows something about the Tutor Vision. I've seen limited information online, and I remember seeing one on eBay a few years back that someone didn't know what it was. But yeah, that would be cool to help him out if we can.
Yeah, if somebody's got something in their basement or their attic or something. We have a couple. There's just a couple links that I found that we'll put in the show notes, and that would sum up everything I know about the Tutor Vision. So, like when I say there's a 3-minute segment, it would mean literally that's all I know about it. So,
yeah. So a couple episodes back, we talked about Rev's Tron Complete compilation. And he had 150 copies of that. And at the time that we did the recording, he had already sold out of the initial pre-orders for it. Well, this month, he's increased the number to 200 copies. And as of January 7th, there are still 21 spots left. So if anybody wants a copy of it, head on over to Atari Age and look for the official thread for Tron Complete for Intellivision.
What is he asking for that?
He hasn't listed a price yet.
You're just being put on the list and figure that out later kind of thing?
Yeah, I assume that means I'm interested. I never got the impression it was a commitment to buy it or anything.
Okay, cool. Good news. Go out and check it out. You want one? They're there. 21 of them anyway.
Yep, as far as I can see, it's still at 21 copies left.
So we've mentioned them a few times, the Retro League podcast. They in episode 213, they did a breakdown of Space Battle as one of their picks of the week. They do a pick of the week for each of them in each episode, and it was just interesting to hear, that breakdown of the game. It's a game that I really enjoyed as a kid, played a ton of. He definitely talked about needing the overlays in the manual, and we've laughed in previous episodes about the Angry Video Game Nerd's treatment of that in a couple of episodes, and they actually mentioned that too. That you see them playing and not really knowing what's going on, like what's going on with the screen. So they mentioned that too. It was a pretty good breakdown actually of Space Battle. I thought maybe I should just shuttle this over to the side and use it whenever we do Space Battle. Just drop that in. So it's pretty good. It's a pretty good explanation of the game.
Yeah, I love that game back then. Played it for days and days.
Yeah, me too.
Did you learn anything from the podcast? Anything you didn't know?
No, not about that game particularly.
Yeah, I think you and I probably played that thing to death, so we knew all the ins and outs of it.
Yeah, definitely.
You are The player. Because your vision is our vision. The player. The player. The player. The player.
The music that you're listening to is called The Player. It's by Aaron Hickman, also goes by the name Diagamblic, and you can find it on SoundCloud. Just search for Diagamblic, Diagamblic. We will have a link in the show notes. And the reason I'm playing this song is because there is a new ColecoVisions podcast. It was started by our friend of the show, Focus RS, William Culver, or Arcade USA on YouTube. He goes by a lot of different names. He's started it with SoCal Mike Kennedy from the Retrogaming Roundup podcast. And the idea is that it's going to be a lot of material on the ColecoVision, but it's also going to focus on the other things that Coleco put out, the handhelds and all sorts of other little games. Coleco was a very prolific company with all sorts of products. So that would be ColecoVisions.com or ColecoVisionspodcast.blogspot.com. I don't know if they're on iTunes yet, but they do have an RSS feed, and you can check it out on the main site, and that'll have all the links, and we'll put it in the show notes, of course, too. I wish him luck in locating people that worked on that. My understanding is a lot of the Coleco programmers were, it was just farmed out to programmers in Japan, which may or may not have been Nintendo. I certainly am a fan of ColecoVision. I know, I guess I know I am. So there you go.
I always wanted to get one, and I've actually looked at several points over the last few years. I've looked into could I get into this system? Could I get a hold of one and start collecting for it too? Because as I understand it, it's kind of similar to the Intellivision in its library in terms of the number of games and the style of some of the games, and although it tended to favor a whole lot of arcade ports, I believe.
Yeah.
But,
it's a
I'm
fun
looking
system.
forward to hearing it.
It's good to pick up Atari Max. He puts out multi-carts for a lot of Atari 8-bit related stuff, but he has an SD card multi-cart for the ColecoVision. So I've got one of those. Very cool way to just load it up with everything.
Yeah, I'm just kind of afraid they're going to start a really cool podcast, and then I'm going to be buying ColecoVision stuff.
It's funny. I don't collect as much for that. I have my original system, which I've mentioned before on previous shows, and I have probably the core group of maybe 15 or 20 games that I had back then, and a few that were added over the years on eBay, but mostly after that, I don't have a great desire to collect because I have the multi-card and I just want to play the games. I'm not really displaying any ColecoVision boxes or anything like that, but yeah, it's a fun system. I don't know the total number of games that were put out, including homebrew. There is homebrew development as well, but not as much as the Intellivision and 2600, of course. But good luck with that, guys.
I had a chance to pick one up a few years ago, but just didn't have the money for it. It's the system and a bunch of games.
Yeah, this is only kind of slightly related, but did you guys see a couple months back, I guess, there was a ColecoVision Kickstarter project. Some company was going to put out a full-on ColecoVision. Did we talk about it in the show?
I don't think so. I don't remember if we mentioned it or not, but it was just going to be an app on like an iPad or something, and they wanted they wanted like $900,000.
It was a crazy, I thought it was $250,000 or something, but it was a crazy amount of money, and they didn't get any, they didn't even get like a tenth of it. But I was really kind of bummed because they're the same people that did a Vectrex port to the iPad, and that's awesome. It's a very well done environment. Pick your game. It's got gives you a 3D game room you're in, and I thought, man, if they do that treatment to the ColecoVision, this could be really cool. And the Vectrex game is iCade aware, so presumably they would make their ColecoVision port thing iCade aware as well, and but it just didn't get anywhere near the money it needed. And I know the Retrogaming Roundup guys talked about it a little bit, and Scott's take on it, he was kind of suspecting that whoever owns the IP for ColecoVision probably thought it was worth a ton of money, and that it was the licensing that was driving the cost up. Because it's not like they had to create an emulator from scratch. I'm sure there are ColecoVision emulators already. So. And they had already done the Vectrex, so they should have had something, at least a process for putting this stuff together. So
yeah, I've not followed up to see if they were going to relaunch that or try to retool it in some way, but it would have been a cool idea, I guess. But I don't know if it's emulating Coleco games on a touch screen. I'm not interested. But yeah, iCade support would be cool.
Yeah, but this isn't the news segment about old Kickstarters.
It isn't? No. I thought we added that. It's in the show notes, right? No.
New show note category: old Kickstarters that we want to talk about months later.
Failed Kickstarter segment. Yes.
You could do a whole podcast on failed Kickstarters.
You know what? We should start a podcast on failed Kickstarters. Let's do a Kickstarter to fund the podcast on failed Kickstarters.
Every episode would start with.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for playing with us. Here's some lovely parting gifts.
Oh, wait, there's no gifts because we didn't fund it.
Alrighty.
We need an Intellivoice. Get back on track, just like they do in RGR.
Ready.
And what do you think, Odyssey 2?
It doesn't matter. No one cares about your stupid podcast anyway.
Which of these Intellivision podcasts do you think is the real thing? A. Intellivisionary.
You're listening to the Intellivisionaries.
Or B. Intelli-idiots.
Yeah, let's see here. Intellivision. Intelligent television. Hey, little bell. I think this TV gonna get smart now.
Now let's take a closer listen. A. Intellivisionaries.
Welcome to the Intellivisionaries podcast.
Or B. Intelli-idiots.
Mattel Electronics presents 317 bomb.
What the? Hey, little bell, how'd they get your papa in that little cartridge?
If you guessed A. Intellivisionaries, you were correct.
Okay.
And speaking of podcasts, there's a podcast for the Atari 8-bit computers called Antic. And Antic is one of the chips in the Atari, one of the graphics chips that allowed it to do a lot of the things that it did. So there's 3 hosts on that show: Randy Kindig, Brad Arnold, and Kevin Savitz. And Kevin is an Intellivision collector, and he says that that's one of the systems, I guess pretty much the only system he really collects for other than the Atari 8-bit computers. And got to talking with him, and they invited me to come on to the show. So what I assume is going to be their January show, I was a guest host on the show throughout, because I'm a big Atari 8-bit fan. I grew up with that computer after the Intellivision, and used that through high school and into college, and did programming on it, created several little games myself and demos. So it was fun to be a part of their show, and I just wanted to thank them. You can find them at ataripodcast.com. They're on iTunes and all the usual places as well. And we will have Kevin on one of our future episodes, probably the February show, as a guest and contributing for the game review and stuff like that. So thanks, guys. Check out Antic, the Atari podcast. And finally, in news, I have to give a big round of applause to Mike Kennedy, SoCal Mike. I received my the premiere issue of Retro Magazine, and there it is right there. And it has that new magazine smell. Beautiful magazine. video game magazine, not strictly retro gaming, retro and modern stuff. And we talked to Mike a couple episodes ago about this when it was his Kickstarter, and clearly it was funded. The magazine's out. It's very nice. I'm very pleased to have it in my hands, and it's just kind of a throwback to the days when we ravenously read through these gaming magazines to find out all of our news. So congratulations, Mike. Awesome job. Looking forward to the year of retro.
Yes, indeed.
Hey everybody, it's SoCal Mike from the Retro Gaming Roundup podcast and the video gaming auction site GameGavel.com. And when I need my Intellivision fix, I tune into the Intellivisionaries podcast.
I know what you say, and I know what you mean.
The Intellivisionaries interview.
So today we're talking to Tommy Tallarico. He is a video game composer and has been for 25 plus years, done over 300 games and counting. He's the creator of the concert series Video Games Live, where they've toured the world and had choirs and orchestras from all over the world play the music, video game music, with synchronized gaming footage. He is the founder and CEO of the nonprofit Game Audio Network Guild, which is sort of a pro game industry group, promote gaming and game music. And he's also a TV show personality. He's been on the Electric Playground, Reviews on the Run, Judgment Day. Personally, he's also an arcade benefactor. He got me started on the whole arcade garage collection that I have going. And most importantly, he is the second best Intellivision baseball player that I know. Welcome to the show, Tommy.
Ouch, that was brutal.
Oh, well, you have beaten me in it a few times.
Yeah, no, you seem to I thought I was unbeatable, but then again, you thought you were unbeatable in hockey now, didn't you?
Yes. you have the distinction of being the only person that I can remember who's ever beaten me in television hockey, and that hurts. That cuts me deep, man.
And I do it often.
Again, thank you for pointing that out. Yes, often and with an extreme lack of humility, I will say.
Yeah.
Yes, he is a tough opponent. He is my Intellivision buddy now. So it's, as you know, listeners, it's difficult to find people to play these two-player games, especially people who didn't play them for hours and days on end like we did. So when you do find somebody, it's good to have the competition and get your skills back up again.
Now, Paul, did you have brothers and sisters growing up?
Yeah, I have a sister a couple years older. She wasn't really into the games. Played a few here and there.
Yeah, see, I had a younger brother, so I always had a partner in crime whenever I wanted to play Intellivision. Now, my mom and dad, though, I would always play Intellivision with my mom and dad, but, they wouldn't want to play, 5 hours every day,
Right.
but my brother did. So I always had, that was the one thing about Intellivision, when it first came out was, you had to have pretty much a second person if you wanted to play some of the, the real awesome challenging games. You can only play Astro Smash for 8 hours in a row so many times.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of those early games were all two-player, and especially the sports titles. In fact, I think all the sports titles were two-player until later on when INTV started re-releasing things.
Yeah, and I play those now, and the great thing about those re-releases is that the computer is actually really good. It's challenging when you put it on like expert mode or whatever. It's actually gives you a decent challenge, even in games like the hockey and baseball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only thing that I would complain about the hockey, I like the re-releases, but the re-released hockey, for some reason, they decided to make the rink square, which I don't know why they couldn't keep those rounded corners, but it changes the dynamic.
Totally. Yeah. Well, as you know, I mean, we don't even play the new hockey, even though there's different things like you can choose the guy you want to pass to and all that. But that kind of takes the challenge out of it. And like you said, the square rink and all that. So yeah, we go old school with the hockey, but new school with the baseball to get in the sliding and the fly balls, and of course the much more controlled pitching, which we love.
Oh, right. The impossible, if you take physics into account, pitches that you can throw with that game. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The balls that start at 90 miles an hour, then when they get 10 feet from the plate, they slow down to 3 miles an hour and then curve. Yeah.
And your opponent swinging and missing never gets old.
No, it doesn't. No.
And yeah, there's something about that original hockey. It's not as much fun to play the new one, because that original one, when you knock the guy down and he just sits and sits and sits and there's not a damn thing you can do about it.
The best thing about hockey, though, is the sound when you trip a guy and he falls on his ass. I mean, that's still that one sound. Thunk.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just still to this day one of the greatest video game sounds. I mean, it's right up there with, Pac-Man munching dots. I mean, that trip sound is the greatest of all time.
Especially when you're the guy who made that sound happen.
That's right.
Not so much when you're on the receiving end.
Yeah.
But so the baseball, there's nothing wrong with the original Major League Baseball, but the one that we play, which goes by a few different names depending on what you're looking at, is the one that has the fly balls and the sliding, and as you mentioned, the pitching, and makes it a lot more challenging for sure. And that's another one of those games, though, that if you didn't play it, or you didn't play the original, and you try to play somebody and you try to teach them, it's just
never works.
Right. You might as well just play the computer on the easiest level, and it's still going to be harder.
Exactly. So
when you were growing up, and you got the Intellivision, since as we record this, it's a few days before Christmas, 2013. Yeah. You got your system as a Christmas gift, is that correct?
Yeah. The first year it came out, that Christmas. So that would have been what, 79 or 80? Well,
yeah, because they originally test marketed in like late 78 and into 79, but some places got stuff at 79. Most were getting it in 80.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
And I had, I remember, and then of course after that Christmas, then the next couple years, the Christmas presents were all based around either Intellivision games or the Intellivoice, or, getting some kind of, wacky add-on or whatever. But that's all you wanted for Christmas was new games for your Intellivision. I mean, my whole life revolved around Intellivision. Like anything my mom wanted to bribe me with, to do something, hey, if you get, good marks in school, I'll get you an Intellivision game. If you shovel the driveway for the whole month, I'll get you an Intellivision game at the end of the month. So everything was, it was our crack. Mm-hmm. Our parents knew exactly how to use it to their advantage. Kudos to them. And but that was it. I mean, the first year when I got my Intellivision, of course, it came with the blackjack and all that. So a fine tool. Thank you, Mattel, for getting kids addicted to gambling at an early age, right out of the box. I had no idea how to play blackjack or poker until Intellivision went in my home. I was 12 years old in 1980, so right in there. And then and then skiing was the other big game that we got that first year. And again, it was. Intellivision for our family was, it was just another family game we played. We played Monopoly, we'd play Scrabble and Aggravation and Trouble, mm-hmm. and Chutes and Ladders. And then when Intellivision came in, it started kind of dominating even those classic board games that we'd play, Yahtzee, we would it was, hey, let's play Intellivision. And it was really amazing. I mean, again, playing. I remember, hours and hours playing skiing with my mom, you know?
Yeah, I didn't have that same experience. My parents were not interested in the games. I mean, my dad was briefly interested when it was like B-17 bomber or something war related, you know. He'd glance over for a few minutes. But yeah, I have distinct memories of Christmas of '82 getting the Intellivoice and getting B-17 bomber and getting Bomb Squad, Space Spartans. But I didn't get my Intellivision as a Christmas gift. Originally, I started out with an Atari VCS or 2600 to those of you who were born later. But my neighbor next door, David, had Intellivision. I believe he got it as a Christmas gift around the same year that you did. I think it was 80.
Right.
It might have been 79, but I can't recall. But yeah, I remember quickly discovering this 2600 isn't exactly that great now that I see this Intellivision thing. And, you know, we'd have sleepovers, and usually I'd do much better at him in the sports games. But that was just the system that I had to have. And we had a family friend. I've mentioned this on the podcast. We had a family friend who worked for Mattel and worked out a deal to get me the Intellivision for a discounted price back then. So I picked it up, and it just went from there. Like you, I was obsessed with the system. I had to have as many games as I could. My mom did the bribery thing as well. Because those games, I mean, think about it. They were like $40 games in 1980. You know, and I don't know what that would equate to today, but probably about 3 times as much.
Yeah, probably like, $90 or $100 in today's dollars. Now, I never had a 2600. I was opposite of you. I had a friend down the street who had a 2600. But my a cousin of mine who lived the next town over, their family got an Intellivision as well. And when another family that you knew had an Intellivision also, that was like a whole portal into a potential new library of games, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so I never bought Microsurgeon, but they had Microsurgeon, and so I would go over their house to play Microsurgeon, or maybe we would, maybe I would trade. Hey, you can borrow Utopia for a week, can I borrow Microsurgeon for a week, or whatever? But everybody seemed to have MLB baseball. It was like, and it wasn't the pack-in to the game, as you know, poker and blackjack were, but I don't know any person who had Intellivision that didn't have Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I mean, that was more than likely. That's because that was one of the launch titles. And when they designed that, the guy, David Rolfe, he was designing the operating system of the Intellivision, and he needed to create a game to test out his operating system. And that was the game that they created at the same time. Along with like Armor Battle and Math Fun. That and Poker Blackjack, that was one of the launch titles. Everybody had that too that I knew that had an Intellivision.
Now, being a sound guy, I have heard this a number of times. I don't know it to be 100% true. Maybe you know it, but according to sources, I believe that Major League Baseball Intellivision was the very, very first video game ever in the world to have voice in a game. If you go back and look in even the arcade stuff, like, ba 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 chicken, fight like a robot, like all those games came out after MLB baseball, even the arcade games. So do you know that to be accurate? I mean, no one has ever said that they know of a game that had voice that was for sale to the general public before MLB baseball.
Yeah, I've heard the same story as you, and I don't know of any other games, arcade or otherwise, that did that. Of course, we're referring to the "you're out" sound, which sounds exactly like this. I think probably people maybe didn't distinguish exactly what was being said the first few times you heard that, but since there was text on screen to tell you, it quickly got into your head, and yeah, it did sound like speech.
Yeah. I still don't know how the hell they did it. I mean, was it just they must have just been messing with the sound chip or something. I mean, it wasn't a sampled voice, so I have no idea.
Yeah, you just have that one General Instruments sound chip in there that does. It's got 3 voices and white noise generator. So somehow they figured out a way to do that. Yeah, we got to talk to David Rolfe and see what was going on with that.
Yeah, sure.
They'll be looking for us.
So when you played as a kid with your brother Mike, Mike's a couple years younger than you, is that right?
Yeah.
So were you usually the one who was schooling him, and he was the one hitting the reset button and screaming, or was it?
No. He was always a good challenge. Even though, I mean, I was born in '68 and he was born in '75, so it was quite a difference because we had a sister in the middle. But it was quite an age difference because he was only 6 or 7 years old. But he gave me a run for my money though in hockey because he was a big hockey fan. And then Triple Action we would play constantly all the time. Bump and Jump, we'd go back and forth with that. Frog Bog. So bowling, skiing, SNAFU. I mean, that was the genius thing about those games. Like if you had a teenager, you took a teenager now, and you pitted them against a 6 or 7 year old in like Halo or Gears of War, it would be no contest. I mean, they would just completely be blown away, right? But the great thing about a game like SNAFU is, somebody could pick it up after a couple minutes and start to be good at it.
Except for my mom.
Except for your mom. So I mean, we played. We played. Again, hours and hours, days and days of stuff like Triple Action and Frog Bog. Any of those 2-player games and the hockey. Yeah, and if you were going to play those sports games too, I mean, we're talking pretty much real time. 2, 3, 20-minute periods. There was no time wasn't condensed during these things. You're going to play 2 hours if you're going to play a football game. Yeah, well, and with soccer, he was a big soccer fan as well, so he always wanted to play soccer, and that was a long game. Yeah, and my friend that I played with before I had my system, when I would spend the night at his house, we'd get started on football or something, and we'd be about maybe half, 3/4 of the way into it, and he's losing too badly. He just hits the reset button, and we're playing something else. That was his method. Yeah. Ouch. But it's funny. I reconnected with him recently, and we played some Intellivision over here, and he schooled me in the basketball. So. Oh yeah, I'm good at basketball too. Yeah. Yeah, I played all the sports games, but I primarily played the hockey and the baseball. Yeah. So. I remember when me and you had played soccer, it wasn't pretty. No. It was like 10-0, I think. Again, thanks for that. We played a little basketball as well, and I think after the second quarter, we decided to change games because it was pretty... It was a pathetic massacre. Don't hold back, Tommy. Just tell me how it really happened. Oh yeah, I don't know. I had an off day that day. Okay, so that's all I can say for that. But yeah, the soccer was kind of interesting. But I didn't play it that much. I had a friend who was really into soccer, and he and I would play it. But that game is one of those ones where you have a finite number of guys because there's only so many sprites, 8 sprites that you can have on screen at once. So you kick the ball downfield, and then you quickly cut the other way off screen, and immediately your guy shows up again on the other side of the screen, and you've got the ball. And that was a strategy that you have to master to be good at that game. Now, the great thing about having that cartridge that has everything on it, the Cuddle Cart, the great thing about it is one of the fun things that me and you do when we get together for our Intellivision days is that we'll sometimes play a game that we've really never played before, sometimes never even heard of really before, and we'll sit there and we'll play it as much as we can, as long as we can, just to say that we've played it and beat it. And what the hell was that Tubin game? Whitewater, a magic. Wow. I mean, we spent a good couple couple hours on that.
Oh, we spent I think we spent half the day on that one time, and we couldn't be bothered to try to read the on-screen text manual, and we didn't have the other manual in front of us, and too lazy to Google it. So, yeah, we just figured it out, and I mean it ended up being a pretty cool game, I think. But it's just a WTF moment when you turn it on and you're like, wait a minute, how do I control this raft, and why am I going? Okay, now I'm on the shore. Now who's this guy with the stick? And
it's really difficult. It's a really difficult game. I challenge people to pick up that game and actually try to do it. I mean, because it's frustrating, but it ends up being kind of challenging in the end.
Yeah.
But, the other game me and my brother would play, because he was a huge Masters of the Universe fan. So he had all the action figures and stuff. So my mom, for his birthday one year, got him the He-Man game. And we'd have fun. That wasn't a two-player game, but we had fun, trying to best each other's scores and stuff. And that was a great thing, too. Like, me and my brother used to keep stats. I still have these pieces of paper where we'd keep stats. We'd keep our records. We kept everything. And nice. What's the high score on He-Man? Who can beat the high score this week on He-Man? And
hey, if you want to send me some of that stuff, I'll put it in the show notes for the episode.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have all my baseball stats and everything.
Nice. Yeah, and speaking of games that we hadn't really tried before, was it maybe a month or so ago, we hooked up the ECS and the Intellivoice and the Intellivision, and we fired up World Series Major League Baseball, the multi-screened Don Daglow and the other guy. There was another guy involved in that game. Name slips me at the moment. But wow,
yeah, that was not. And then it was supposed to be. This is supposed to be a system that's supposed to show off new stuff. It's supposed to be a better system, right? Mm-hmm. A better game, a better experience, and it literally did nothing well. It was really an awful experience. I can't believe that the same guy, Don Daglow, who's a friend, I can't believe the same guy who did Intellivision Utopia did that game. So
to be fair to Don, he was the co-designer, so he may have been more the stats guy. I'm not really sure.
Or the guy that they brought in towards the end to try to save it, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it was a lot worse before that even.
Well, the problem with that game is I give him an A for effort, because I remember that commercial. It would have been Christmas 1982. And George comes out and he's talking. They've got this cool 80s synth pop playing in the background. He's talking about how other companies want you to buy new systems, but with the addition of this keyboard, you'll be able to play games like this. And they show some real quick cutaway footage, and you see the guy running, and then it cuts to another angle, and it's like the TV angle, like multi-screen and screen thing. And I remember seeing that back then and just being blown away, like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing ever. But it never came out in any numbers to make anybody really play it or see it, because it came out when the video game crash happened. So
right.
And who had an ECS and an Intellivoice and bought this game? So by the time we got
the person I knew who had an Intellivoice. I didn't know anyone else who even had an Intellivoice, let alone that thing.
Yeah, that was another big thing that didn't catch on immediately, and I don't think sales ever really were that high for the Intellivoice. I don't know the numbers offhand, but could find that out. But yeah, that game, I see what they were trying to do, and it was a cool idea. But when you try to actually play that game, when we played it, it's too hard to see where the ball is when you're batting because of the angle.
It's kind of a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, and the pitching, what is it, like 4 steps to pitch the ball?
What we ended up doing, we just said, okay, look, we have to pitch the ball just straight down the middle at medium speed. So we just took the pitching element completely out of it and just said, look, just pitch it down the middle. And even then, it was almost impossible to hit the freaking ball.
Yeah, and then there's like that pseudo automatic fielding. It's very like abrupt. The ball, if you do manage to hit the ball, it starts to fly off the screen, and your fielders sort of jump around for a second, and then there's like this abrupt screen cut, and then you're looking at your outfielder, and you're like, well, wait, do I need to run him in? Is he going to do this by himself? And sometimes it seems like they would completely ignore the ball, and you're controlling some other fielder who's nowhere near it, and he has to go get it and throw it. But I will say those fielders could throw their arms off. I mean, they threw that ball to home from deep left or center field without any problem.
Yeah. And it's funny, people ask me a lot of times when doing interviews and stuff like, what's your favorite video game ever of all time? And, Super Mario World is up there, and games like, Shadow of the Colossus, some, modern type stuff as well, Red Dead Redemption. But, when you think about it, because, you have to really kind of go by eras as well. But when you think about it, when I say, well, let me see, my favorite game of all time, I guess would kind of be the game that you played the most, right? The game that you played the most. Clearly, you wouldn't play a game if you didn't like it, right? And so, and when I sit down and I think about what is the game I played the most in my whole life, I would put like 2 or 3 Intellivision games up there. Major League Baseball being one of them. Utopia being another one. I've played those games more hours-wise than Super Mario. I mean, once you play Super Mario World and you finish it, you kind of never go back to it again, right? But Major League Baseball, Utopia. I mean, Utopia was the first real-time strategy game, I think, ever. I mean,
first sim game, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of, I don't know of any game that was even in. I mean, you talk about Sim City and the stuff that those guys did, but Will Wright, but nothing was like Utopia, even on the computers and stuff. I mean, this is pre, Apple II and all that stuff. So it was so ahead of its time. But the amazing thing is for grown adults now, like me and you, to maybe not psychologically, but for grown-ups to sit down and still be able to play that game for hours and hours, Utopia.
Right.
I mean, doesn't that say something? That's amazing.
Absolutely. And I would say, I mean, playing that as a kid was fun, but I think it's even more satisfying now because you know a little bit more about various strategies and you're trying to figure out how the different elements will affect your score and how much you earn. And by the way, we have tried several things. If you buy all factories, nothing but factories, you're going to win and you're not going to get any rebels. Tommy figured that one out. I think I have the screenshot to prove it. On the other hand, if you're Mr. Altruistic and you buy yourself a fishing boat and you build houses and plant crops, you're screwed. You're done.
Schools, yeah. We just we really need to corner Daglow on that because clearly he's a Republican.
Yeah, something happened there. Yeah, so we haven't really figured out all the algorithms. There's something I gotta show it you, Tommy. I don't think I've mentioned it to you before. There's a guy. He's the guy who's behind that Left Turn Only company. They did the Space Patrol and they put out the Christmas Carol.
Right. Yeah.
Now, and he's a programmer, and he's designed the carts and to allow a lot of these new homebrew games to be made. And he basically disassembled the code of Utopia, and he went through it, and he was kind of breaking down what did what.
Really?
Yeah. So I will have to send you that. And I don't.
Oh my gosh!
I haven't read the whole thing. I found out about it only recently. I think it was a while ago. He did it on some like Intellivision programmers list, so it wasn't like readily available to everybody.
Now, where's that guy live? We got to get him in the Intellivision.
He's East Coast, I believe. I talked to him once before at Classic Gaming Expo. Maybe actually last time I talked to him a couple of times. But yeah, he's kind of the hardware guru, and he's also a programmer. So.
Oh, yeah, that'd be very interesting. Take the guesswork out of what we tried to do one day. We tried to figure it out on our own, and we were scratching our heads.
In the beginning, we would start it, and we would each do one, a certain thing. We would do the same thing for a round and see why there was a difference in the score.
Yeah,
buy exactly the same thing.
Couldn't really figure it out.
Yeah, and then when we play the marathon games, there is a point where you were beating me and you were doing nothing different, and we'd already filled every possible space up and had 30 fishing boats, but suddenly your score started dropping and you were getting less and less per round. And what was it, the sympathy code in there or something?
I don't know.
It seems like sometimes there's no rhyme or reason behind the scoring and how you do well. But you also, I only beat you once in that, twice maybe. Otherwise,
yeah, I think once. Yeah. Yeah. And it was that game where you just, I for whatever reason, I was losing points and you came up and got me right at the end, I think.
So I only won because of an error in the programming.
Well, I mean, I didn't say it, you did. But.
Thanks, Don. Thanks for the little bump there. Got me a win.
Yeah, it's all about fishing and getting who can get the first factories together. That's what we came up with.
Yeah, it's really factories and fishing. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
natural disasters. If you can turn the tables on somebody if they get a couple of hurricanes and twisters.
Yeah,
tornadoes.
And if you play with Tommy, you have to build the fortresses too, because he does not show any mercy whatsoever to anyone.
Well, what we had to do, we had to take off the one trick that I pulled on Paul the very first time we played, and then we had to say, okay, we can't do that anymore, because this is a trick that me and my brother would use all the time, and I guess you never did it.
No, we never. Never occurred to us.
So the first thing I would do is I buy a PT boat for 40, and what you can do is. You take your PT boat and you go all the way over into your other person's dock, and you dock your PT boat in their dock, and then they can never make another boat, a fishing boat or they're screwed right from the beginning. It's pretty epic. And,
yep. That was that first game we played on that, and I'm like, oh, what's he doing with the PT boat? I don't even have any fishing boats yet. I'm just making houses and crops, and everything is wonderful on my little island. And hey,
drop anchor!
I want a fishing boat. What's going on? Oh, that was mean. That was just heartless.
That is mean. That's a mean trick. So we literally have a thing where we say, okay, no one can sink anyone's fishing boats, and no one can. Place the PT boats in the we can sink each other's fishing boats.
Yeah,
right?
We usually don't until like later on in the game when you've got nothing else to do and you're bored.
Right. Now, of course, the one thing about Intellivision Utopia, and I want to make sure, I want to ask Don this if he knew about this, or if this was if he put this in the code. But if you take one of your fishing boats and you go down to the lower right-hand corner of the screen, and you keep pushing, like right where the numbers are, and you keep pushing the disc down, the fishing boat actually sinks underneath the screen, and then you can go anywhere. It can go on land, not that you would want it to, but it also is immune to pirate ships. It's immune it's immune to everything, isn't it? How do you end up? No.
Yeah, but I believe that you can't like stop using it until you can't like select anything else until you go back off the screen and come back normally again.
Right. Or can it get killed by a tornado maybe?
I think a hurricane will knock it out. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a great way to cheat getting some fish, because you can kind of go all over the place.
But you can also do that with the PT boat and just go, harass your guy, just cut across. Of course, whenever Tommy plays, he is very, very sure to put the forts right there where he puts his boat, so that no boat is unprotected for more than 2 minutes.
That's right.
It's a frustrating. You're a frustrating guy to play that game with. But I keep coming back. I think eventually.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on some of the homebrew stuff, like the D2K?
I mean, wow. I mean, I was at the Classic Gaming Expo thing there in Vegas, and that's when I didn't even know this stuff existed, and then I saw this one booth and the guys, doing the Christmas Carol game, like you said, but the Donkey Kong, the DK2. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And it's genius. I mean, it is a very, very difficult game. It's very challenging. And they have the original Donkey Kong in there as well, too. And so, I mean, I was really impressed. I mean, it looks like something that would have come out around that time. And yeah, why the hell didn't they ever do a Donkey Kong 2? What the hell, you know?
Yeah, and that has all the original levels from the arcade version, all the little cutscene intermissions and the sounds. Yeah, when I interviewed William Moeller, he's the head of Electronite that put that out. And of course, Carl Mueller Jr. is the one who programmed that. Yeah, he said it wasn't, obviously the original Donkey Kong was, my opinion is that Coleco put out a crap version so they'd sell more ColecoVisions. But, but then again, they put out so many, you think they want to recoup their money that they spent on that. But yeah, he said he thought it would be a piece of cake to do better than that. But he said it was a little tougher than he thought programming the game. But what he came out with is just amazing on the system. And I've been told that the cartridge that's on could have been released back then. It would have been like the same size cartridge that the World Series Major League Baseball that we were talking about came on, but it could have been done. There weren't any special tricks. But what I did learn is, you know, when we were playing it and you hear the sample of Kong, you know. Yeah. Now, he wouldn't tell me directly, William, when I interviewed him. He kind of laughed it off and said I had to ask Carl. But they figured out a way to do some primitive sample playback, and this is without the Intellivoice, mind you. And on the first version, the DK1, which I didn't have the Electronite version of that until recently, there's actually even more samples, the girl yelling help. And when that happens, he told me that the screen basically, nothing happens. The screen sort of freezes, and then the processor can handle it enough to put out that sample playback, and then the game continues, and they do it in a way that you don't notice it.
Oh, wow. Crazy.
But yeah, that was pretty crazy. I didn't realize that could be done on the Intellivision, but apparently it can.
Yeah. Now, I was a huge Tron fan growing up. As you know, again, when you're 12, 13 years old, and, you know, video games are your life, and the movie Tron comes out, are you kidding me? It's like, you know, it was right up there with Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark for me at the time. And the great thing about Intellivision was no other video game system had more Tron games on it. Tron Solar Sailor, Tron Discs of Tron. I mean, they had, you know, it was amazing. It was really cool.
Yeah, I know Keith has said Keith Robinson is a huge Tron fan as well, and he did Solar Sailor. That was his big game for Intellivision. Yeah. But my understanding is that Mattel got the Tron license, and they weren't real big on licenses. You know, they were doing a lot of original stuff. So I guess they wanted to fully utilize that license and make as many properties from it as they could. And the games were good. I mean, Deadly Discs is a great game.
Still play it, still challenging. Now, I'm friends with the guy who created Tron, Steve Lisberger, and he was over my house once. And I showed him, my Tron Intellivision collection. He was very impressed, including the box that you gave me. And what game was that? That was for the new Tron game. What was it?
That was the Tron game that was originally on the 2600, and then Mattel decided they weren't going to release it on the Intellivision, but it was mostly developed already, and that's Adventures of Tron.
Right. Yeah, and it's kind of a crappy game, but probably good not to release that one. But he had never seen that box before. He was looking at that thing going, "Why? I've never even. I didn't know. I thought I knew all the stuff that existed from Tron." I'm like, "Well, no, from the original Tron." They said, "No, this is something new." So
yeah, and the company that did that, they're called Intelligent Vision, and they've released games like some of the unfinished games. They've had somebody go in and fix the code and whatever, and then they'll put it on a cart in a nice box and they'll put it out there. And there are legal issues with that. You know, Keith Robinson still owns the rights, and of course Disney's Tron license expired 30 years ago. So, but yeah, they're like a small homebrew company, and they put that out there, and they created the box, based on the Tron artwork. But I want to say, speaking of Tron games, there's a guy who's putting together, now it's not anything new game-wise, and we just talked about it in episode 4. He's combined all 4 of the Intellivision Tron games onto like a little multi-cart, with its own Tron themed menu, and he's created the box for it and overlays and stuff, and it looks really, really cool. At least I think he's got overlays going on for it. But it's a cool project. It's real limited numbers. I think it's already sold out or pre-sold. It's not available yet.
Wow. Well, I wonder if he'll have Space on there because that has some Tron recognizers.
Oh, that's right.
Mixed in with Joe's. And yeah, so for people who don't know Space, you'll have to look that one up.
No.
It has some Tron stuff.
Absolutely. There's no reason why it has recognizers in it, but it does. So I guess they just were working on Tron games so much there. They just like, hey, just grab one of those recognizer sprites. We'll use that. But yeah, if anybody doesn't know about Space, I don't think you knew about it until I gave you that cuddle cart, huh?
God no. And but it caught my eye, let me tell you.
That's also an Intellivoice game. So remember, kids, hook up your Intellivoice before you play Space.
Yeah, you do not want to play Space without the Intellivoice. Put it that way. And now Space. That was featured in a little independent movie that I worked on, that I starred in. If people are not familiar with Gamer Wars, that the Mega 64 guys put out, and so just go on YouTube and put in Gamer Wars. That's Wars with a Z, and you'll see the first, and it's just this really odd and awkward film, and we did Gamer Wars 1, Gamer Wars 2, Gamer Wars 3, and then we did Gamer Wars 5. We just thought we'd skip 4 for no apparent reason, but in Gamer Wars 5, the game Space is featured in that movie. So
wow, you didn't tell me about that. I didn't know about that.
I didn't know. You'll have to look that up.
How could you leave me out of Space news? I mean, come on.
I know. But in order to appreciate Space in the 5th movie, you have to watch the previous 3, though. Because if you just watch that one, you're scratching your head. What's going on here? But which you'll do anyway, because it's so bad. It's one of those things that it's a parody of itself, kind of, and nice. It's just very awkward. And that's what Mega 64 is all about, though. Those guys are, It's funny, though. I mean, it's got millions of hits, and people come up to me at Video Games Live all the time. Man, when are you doing the next, the next Gamer Wars? And they actually came out with a full DVD, and it has, they call it commentary on it. So it's my commentary throughout the whole thing. It's pretty funny, but it's all free on YouTube. But just check it out.
I'll put the link to that in the show notes.
Oh God, no!
Okay, I won't.
No, you can. It's so awkward and so bad that some people find it funny. I don't even find it funny, but people do. So.
Well, if it's got Space in it, how bad could it be?
Well, that's the thing, exactly. Actually, in the second, I think the second or third, no, it's the third one, we actually debate. We go back in time because the storyline is that there's 3 friends, and we start talking about which system is better. And I say, on the the Nintendo's better. No, the PlayStation's better. No, the Xbox is better. And then they start fighting and arguing and name calling each other. But in the third movie, we get in a time machine, and I go back, and then we start debating what's better. Intellivision, Atari 2600, or I think Vectrex, and so we start yelling at each other about that and talking about why each system is better and this and that, and it gets pretty interesting. So and I forgot Intellivision was in the third one as well.
Oh man, definitely got to watch that now.
Yeah.
I like listening to this show.
No, you don't.
I never listen to this show. I hate this show.
Okay, so like Tommy, when you and I first met, we actually met at Classic Gaming Expo a couple years back, and talking Intellivision. Turned out we both liked Intellivision, and eventually made it down to your place when you had your annual video game industry party, and got there and was all set to play Intellivision, and you had 3 broken Intellivisions sitting there in your living room.
Very bummed.
And we couldn't play. So basically, I ended up taking the Intellivisions back, got 2 of the 3 working, and we played for an entire day, I think, which was the first time I'd done it, like any real Intellivision playing in a long time. This is before, obviously before the podcast and stuff, but turns out that you had lots of old semi-functioning arcade games in your garage, and worked out an arrangement where I brought a truck down, and you so graciously donated those games to me, which got me going in my whole garage arcade project, and also got me going on becoming better at fixing those games, because I have friends who had them, and I've helped out here and there on different repair things, but I wasn't really an expert on it. And since that time, I've taken those games and converted, one to a MAME, and brought the other ones back to life with power supplies and stuff like that, which we have to do to your Tron, by the way.
Yes.
Unless you finally decide to sell it to me. But
oh, okay.
but yeah, ever since that, we try to get together depending on your schedule, because you were just in Dubai and now you're in Niagara Falls, Canada. So you're all over the place, travel frequently, very frequently, and it's not always easy to get together, but we try to do it as often as we can. And I know the first time when we got together, or that time I brought the cuddle cart down, there was a lot of stuff on there that you hadn't seen before, a lot of the games, and maybe you weren't as aware of the homebrew stuff that was going on, and the additional hardware, some of the things that you didn't have, the ECS and stuff. But do you remember anybody back then when you were a kid that actually had, or did you ever see the original Intellivision computer, the big giant one that was only like test marketed and never widely released?
I never knew anyone who had one. No, not at all. No.
But you remember hearing about it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that TV commercial, was it? Didn't they, or no?
Yeah, I think they had I think they might have had a couple of them, and it was on the box. It was on the original Intellivision system boxes.
Right, that's where I remember it. Yeah.
But the only place I've ever seen that was at Classic Gaming Expo in the museum. I've never seen one in person. Keith Robinson apparently might still have one in his stash of stuff, but that's something I'd like to experiment with. I don't think there's anything like that great on it. I mean, most of the stuff is cassette-based software.
Right. Yeah.
Jack LaLanne and learn French and stuff like that. Not highly useful in today's day and age.
No.
But it makes me wonder what would have happened if that had been more reliable and widely released. Would the Intellivision have been as famous as like the Apple II and the early Atari and Commodore 64? Would it have been competitive? Because the specs on that were pretty impressive, but yeah, probably not. But yeah, clearly they couldn't get it together on that thing with the cost and all that stuff. But
yeah. No, talking about old hardware, my biggest. My holy grail, if you will, of old system stuff. My understanding is that there's only 6 on the entire planet, and I have one of them. Is that the very, very, very first video game system ever put together? It wasn't sold, but it was the first time that a video game system was made. Was of course Ralph Baer in the mid to late 60s created what was called the brown box. So if you go on Wikipedia, you put in Ralph Baer, you put in brown box, and you'll see it, and had that epic fake sticker wood grain finish, and you're like your mom's old station wagon, and which we had one of those, and so there's Ralph Baer has one. There's a museum in Germany has one. The Smithsonian Institute has one, and there's another museum I think in San Francisco that has one, and I have one. So Ralph Baer gave me he built it for me and gave it to me. He was featured on our big PBS special for Video Games Live, and has always been a big fan of the show, and we've always been a big supporter of of Mr. Bear. So that was a huge honor. So that's my one. That's my holy grail of. I mean, I have all the Intellivision stuff, all the Atari stuff, all that stuff too. My wireless Atari 2600 controllers are kind of unique as well too. But
are they functional?
I've never got them to work. No.
Yeah.
But I had Nolan Bushnell sign them though, because he'd never seen. He's like, "What the hell? Oh yeah, I forgot about these."
Never left the prototype stage, I guess. Well, that's pretty cool. I have actually seen your brown box, and that sounds a little bit funny saying that, but I have seen it.
That's right.
And and the Intellivision collection, and also we occasionally, when we get together, we play ColecoVision. So
That's right. Yeah. Now, I think what we have to do, though, and if there's anyone listening to this, is when
about three people listening, I think.
When people who are listening and who are going. The next computer game expo, or what the hell is it called?
Classic Gaming Expo, yeah.
Classic Gaming Expo. Is it going to be in 2014? Because they usually skip a year, right?
That's my understanding, yeah.
What we have to do, we have to set aside a time, and let's get all the Intellivision folks together. Let's, wherever the hotel is, we'll rent a room in that hotel. And we'll bring our Intellivisions and all our stuff, and let's have a big Intellivision tournament. Because you got to think, a lot of the people who go to that expo are loving Intellivision,
mm-hmm.
And so we should have a Major League Baseball tournament, and we'll do trophies too. We'll make up trophies.
I like this.
We'll make up ribbons for like the second place. But we'll get, 10, 15, 20 people in, however many people want to sign up, and we'll do tournaments, and we'll come up with, the whole thing, and we'll do it for baseball. We should do it for hockey. We should do it for Utopia.
Mm-hmm.
All the maybe SNAFU.
Space.
You can't really do it for Astro Smash. I mean,
no, we'll be playing for hours.
7 days, but we could definitely do them for like baseball and hockey, and Utopia would be pretty easy. An elimination tournament. And and we'll and we could have multiple systems going, so you don't have to like wait for hours and hours. So we could set up 4 or 5 systems and have 10 people at a time playing, and then you kind of go down. And I think it'd be awesome.
I think that's a cool idea, and
this is something that me and you are going to have to put together.
Well, I'm planning to have an Intellivisionaries podcast booth there, so we can kind of get people through over there to sign up and arrange everything. Right. I can certainly bring a couple of consoles, and even...
Well, you know what? Maybe we have it at your booth. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe we just set up a bunch and have it at the booth.
Yeah, we could do that. And I think you're onto something, though. I think we'd have to limit it to 2-player games. I think, because, if you're somebody, it's just one guy playing a 1-player game for 3 hours, that's not very entertaining. But, the one-on-one factor, and then how many of these people ever get together with a bunch of like-minded, equally skilled Intellivision players to play 2-player games? I mean, that is the coolest idea.
Yeah. And then maybe we'll take one or two, but put a time limit on it. Like maybe you do Astro Smash, like who can score the most points in 5 minutes or something.
Yeah, that could work. That could work too. So the only thing that I see as a problem is that when you're walking out with a box of trophies, that people are going to be a little bit bitter.
I know, right?
Hey, didn't you bring those for us?
Yeah,
you should have played better, man.
Yeah, you should have practiced more.
Yeah, you're not going to get any sympathy from Tommy when you lose. Just saying. Not that I know that personally or anything, just a hunch. But he does feed you when you lose, so that's good.
That's true.
That's a cool idea. I wanted to ask about Video Games Live. I want you to talk a little bit about it. But before I do, I want to say that the one thing that Video Games Live is missing is footage of Intellivision games. When I went to the Irvine show last summer, and it was a great show, and the backstage thing was really cool, but I don't see any Intellivision stuff.
I know. Well, I mean, I'll have to do like SNAFU opera or something. I don't, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of music in Intellivision games. I would probably say that the most famous Intellivision music was probably from SNAFU, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that was an early title.
I mean,
and then it's got the other part too. Yep. There's a remixed like a totally different version of that on that Keith Robinson's Intellivision in HiFi CD. Yeah. That's famous, but they did use classical in some of the stuff. I mean, the like in Sub Hunt, when you win, it plays the little, I can't remember the name of the song. And what was the other one? Like Thunder Castle has a lot of cool music in it, but people probably don't know it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Not a lot of music. That was the problem. That was one of the things that in television, math fun, ding, 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 ding. I mean, that was it. You had, 2 notes and you were done, 3 notes. So there wasn't a lot of music, no music in skiing and triple action and hockey and baseball and, But
you could do the crowd sound effect. Everybody will know that one. Yeah, you'll do like a 5-second clip of the crowd cheering. And you'll show like a real quick cut of like 15 games, and that's it.
Yeah,
and move on to the Nintendo stuff.
Right.
So, Video Games Live though. All that aside, so right now, you are putting together the funded Kickstarter album. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how that came about?
Yeah. So we've put out 2 albums so far with Video Games Live, and this one's called Level 3. And it's going to have a lot of game music on there that we didn't cover. When the first album came out, you cover everything, Mario, Zelda, Sonic, Warcraft, all the Final Fantasy, all the popular games that you would expect to find on a video game album. And then the second one was our live performance from our PBS special, in which we covered a lot of that stuff as well as some new stuff. But this album is really kind of like the deeper cuts, the stuff that's like super popular, but that no one would ever you would expect to put on a video game album. Things like, Chrono Cross and Beyond Good and Evil and Silent Hill and Shadow of the Colossus and Street Fighter 2. And we also, we have a Tetris opera that we do, but we also have a 25th anniversary Zelda arrangement that's new. Super Mario World arrangements, but things like Monkey Island and Journey and Skyrim and, again, stuff that people normally wouldn't find on an album. So now that we're hitting our 3rd album, we can get really deep with some of the stuff. And it got fully funded back ended in September. And for people still interested, you can actually still get it through our website at videogameslive.com, and you can just get it through PayPal and stuff. We still have some of the tiers. We did like digital tiers after it ended. And the album's coming out February 18th, and it'll be available on Amazon and iTunes and all that stuff. So, and of course, go to videogameslive.com and sign up to our mailing list. If you're interested in seeing a show, just put in where you live and, the state you live in. And when we come to the area, we'll send you an email when tickets go on sale. And we change the show every year. We've been touring now started the company over 11 years ago. And, we change the show every single year. So always adding new material and stuff like that. So,
yeah, it's a great show. I mean, I've seen countless videos of it, but when I went to it live this past August, it's just amazing live experience. And thanks for that, by the way, getting me into the show like that. That was quite an event. My wife was a little disappointed that she wasn't able to make it, but I brought a friend with me. So, and the response from the crowd is great. I mean, and some of the stuff you've shown me when you're in other parts of the world is amazing. And you're going to put some of the live stuff on this album as well, right?
Yeah, we're doing one track live. It's from Portal. The song's called "Still Alive" by Jonathan Colton, and we do it at the end, kind of as our encore. And when I toured down in South America, which is always the biggest crowds, the biggest, loudest people in the world. So we played in Peru, Argentina, Chile, and Brazil. And I asked at the end of each show, I told the folks, we're recording this for the album, and whoever's the loudest will make it on the CD, the final CD. So, in Chile, the Chile performance ended up getting on there. But what I did as well, because it was really close in all the countries, so I took the audiences from all the other 3 countries that didn't make it, and I layered them into the Chile performance as well.
Nice.
So it's four countries together, all doing it. So the audience anyway. So yeah.
Oh, that's sweet. So
Cool.
Just getting back to Intellivision briefly here, I was curious, when did the Intellivision go in the closet when you were a kid? Was that the video game crashed? What replaced it? What got it out of your life until later?
What happened is I got an Apple IIe, and I had ColecoVision at about the same time. Mm-hmm. And so what happened in my house is that I had my Apple IIe and my ColecoVision in my room, and then my brother got the Intellivision, but we didn't stop playing it because he had an Intellivision, and then he got an NES as well. So now you're talking 1985. So we were still playing Intellivision in 85. Because he would play, we'd play Mario Brothers for a while or whatever, and then play with Rob the Robot. But then we would always go back, hey, let's play some hockey, and we never looked at the Intellivision as it was like, oh, that thing's old, it's out of date. Not like you would now, like people who have PlayStation 4s, they're not busting out their old PlayStations and thinking, hey, that looks pretty good still. No,
right.
It actually looks like crap, and it plays like crap, and the frame rate is awful, and this and that. But back then, Intellivision was so, you look at the ColecoVision stuff and it looked a little better, but it wasn't like leaps and bounds, because again, back then it was all about the gameplay,
right.
and nothing beats the gameplay of those Intellivision sports games and some of the other games as well. So it was always in our home. And then when we moved in '89, we moved out of that house, and that's when my brother and my mom moved up to Canada, and they took the system with them, and then that's when I kind of stopped playing it. But we were still playing it into the late 80s, even after the crash. We were still playing it, and then I just didn't have access to one for 30 years. And the 3 broken ones that I had in my home were things that I would buy at, I bought one at the Classic Gaming Expo, which unfortunately didn't work. I bought one on eBay once, but when I first moved to California, I saw an ad in a paper for she was a grandmother who was, she put a thing in the paper a whole box of Intellivision games and an Intellivision. I think she was getting rid of it for $50, and I called her up. I drove over her house, and I bought a whole. And they were pristine too. They were mint in box.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, and she had boxes of them, and I bought the whole thing from her. And I tried to hook it up, and one of the controllers was working, but it was kind of wonky. So I never. Even though I bought the thing, I never really played it until I met you, and then you'd fix my stuff. And now when you have good stuff working, then I play it all. And then with that Cuddle Cart, I play it all the time. And by the way, you haven't been to my place, but I got a bigger TV now.
Oh,
it's a much bigger TV, and the Intellivision looks amazing on it.
sweet.
Yeah.
Is that going to help my hockey scores any?
No.
Well, yeah, I was curious because similar experience for me. I mean, I had the Intellivision, and then I bought the ColecoVision, and I remember being disappointed with it. And I've talked to you about this, the way that some of the sprites sort of cancel each other out and flicker when they're on the same line.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh, this is more advanced than my Intellivision. I don't think so. But yeah, it went away after the home computer stuff for a while. And I didn't know that INTV was carrying on and making games in the mid 80s. I found out like in 89 when I got one of their catalogs, and that's when my buddy and I started buying the re-releases.
Right.
And we bought them at their local store, which was in Torrance, California, when they were still open. But you didn't know about any of the INTV stuff back then, huh?
No, none at all.
Because apparently what they did originally is they acquired Mattel's customer list, and they sent a catalog to everybody who was registered on that list to try to get people to start buying. But obviously it worked for some, because INTV stayed in business until like 91. They went bankrupt.
Wow, amazing.
But they were on the shelves in Toys R Us right alongside the NES and the Master System.
Unbelievable.
And some of those games are extraordinarily valuable now, like Spiker Volleyball and Stadium Mud Buggies.
Yeah.
Just because they were released in such limited numbers. But yeah, I didn't play much. I have a couple friends that we would play with, and they've either, too busy with family and work or moved away, and I hadn't done any real playing for quite some time until you and I hooked up and started playing again. And yeah, it's great to that's the thing about Intellivision. Not only do you have to have a working system, but you have to have a competitor to play with, because the one-player games are fun, but they're not as fun as the other ones.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, Tommy. It was great talking to you about Intellivision, and I look forward to losing at hockey on the big screen TV in your living room.
Awesome.
In the meantime, have a good Christmas, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And man, it just brings back so many memories. And for the people listening to this, I'm sure, we all lived a similar type of childhood. And that's a great thing about Intellivision, is that, you think back and it brings you back to that time when you were a kid. And it's, such a happy feeling. And that's what I love the most about Intellivision when I think about it. It brings back, some of the greatest times and memories in your whole life. And, not a lot of things in this world can have that same kind of effect. So I'm an Intellivision player for life, for sure.
Agreed. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks.
I know what you say, and I know what you
They'll never do it in time.
The code, figure out the code.
We'll get them. Replace this first, this fourth, this third, this second. Right, more 26 minutes till blast. You did it!
So, this episode, we're going to be talking about Bomb Squad. Bomb Squad was a 1982 release on Intellivision, and it was an Intellivoice game.
Yes.
And we didn't do a lot of talking about the Intellivoice back in episode 1 when we went through the system and most of the hardware add-ons. It wasn't until later I'm like, wait a minute, we didn't talk about the Intellivoice very much, and that was kind of an important component.
Yeah, we touched on it, but we didn't go into detail. We said we'd do it in a future episode. So I guess we've arrived at that episode.
It must be now.
I'll go into a little bit. Honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of information about the Intellivoice. Fortunately, when I had Keith Robinson and Joey Silvian, which you'll hear later in the episode, I had them talk quite a bit about the Intellivoice and how that came about, and some of the technical stuff behind it. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But basically, the Intellivoice was introduced in 1982. It hit the market with 3 titles: Space Spartans, Bomb Squad, and B-17 Bomber. And the games were well reviewed, but they weren't big sellers. In June 83, only about 300,000 each of the voice unit and first games had been shipped, compared to over 3 million televisions at that point. And a lot of those Intellivoice units were still sitting on the shelves. And the fourth game, when Keith Robinson ended up taking over the game from Don Daglow, the Tron Solar Sailor, that basically sold about 90,000. So they had plans for an international Intellivoice module, and they ended up canceling those. And in August of '83, they pulled the plug on the Intellivoice altogether. They had work continuing on a couple of titles, Space Shuttle and World Series Major League Baseball. And the voice was only going to be an enhancement, because the original idea, which you'll hear in the interview, was that the voice was supposed to be integral to the games. You had to have it to play the games. That was what Mattel wanted at the time. And as they saw that it wasn't selling as they thought it would, they kind of made it an enhancement. And the baseball game did come out, and Space Shuttle never made it really past the prototype stage. They had some other things in development, Magic Carousel, which was a children's game. And when it came to the World Series Major League Baseball, the fact that it used the Intellivoice was just sort of mentioned in passing on the back of the box. It wasn't really promoted. So that was kind of the short lifespan of the Intellivoice. But getting back to the game Bomb Squad, this is a game that you can't play without the Intellivoice.
Yeah, it's definitely integral, like you were talking. I'm kind of curious, though, about you had one growing up in Intellivoice?
I got it for Christmas in '82, along with the three, with Space Spartans, B-17, and Bomb Squad, yeah.
William, you had one?
Yeah, I've actually have 2 of the Intellivoices and at least 1 copy of each of those 3 games.
And so I mean, as a kid, I didn't know it was selling poorly or anything like that. And I don't know, it just seems like it was so. I remember feeling really excited about this.
Me too.
That these games were going to talk. I mean, that was like a the Angry Video Game Nerd in his Intellivision episode actually mentions that the idea, it seems probably silly to kids today, like, so what, but it was a big deal.
That was huge. You saw that maybe in the arcade, Berserk or Sinistar in '82, but that was around '82 was the time that Intellivoice came out, and there weren't talking games at home at that point.
And then in the pinball games as well.
Right.
The as we know, we've heard it on the show, the Odyssey 2 had a voice module, and it's my understanding that unlike Intellivision's approach, most of their voice add-ons were just add-ons. Like most games that had a voice capability, you could play with or without the voice plugin. And were there other voice modules for systems, or
just briefly on the Odyssey 2? The difference, I don't think that the voices were created the same way, but the Odyssey they used it for sound effects too, because the limited sounds in the Odyssey 2, we can only do so much, and they actually used it for a couple of games, not just for voice, but for different sounds. But the sound didn't come out of the TV; it came out of the unit itself, which made it kind of. It didn't really blend in as well. It had its own volume control like the Intellivoice, but it just sounded like it was, somewhere else. It wasn't necessarily your game that you were hearing. But I don't recall any other systems. I mean, I know that the 2600, they did Quadrun, that game that they figured out a way to make the game talk without any additional hardware. But some of the home computers, the Atari 8-bit computers, had a software synthesizer, voice synthesizer called SAM, and you could type in things and it would say it. I'm sure the Commodore 64 had the same thing. But home consoles, no. I don't remember anybody else having that potential then at that time.
It's kind of strange. I mean, I haven't heard the interview yet that's coming later, but it's kind of strange to me that it didn't sell well. Because, like I said, as a kid, I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, and I guess, given whatever numbers that it did sell, I don't have the final sales figures or anything, but only that number of people was the market for the Intellivoice games. So you're just a small portion of the Intellivision owning community. So I think I remember they had some price cuts on it, and there was a rebate, and I recall an offer where you sent in the UPC, the bottom of the boxes from like 4 or 5 games, and they sent you Solar Sailor and maybe some sort of rebate or something. But yeah, they were practically giving them away at the end there.
I wonder if early on it was just a marketing problem, like like if people had known about it more, would they have sold more? Because again, I don't, growing up with it again, and I'm remembering this through my 12-year-old eyes or whatever, but I didn't see the problem with the product itself. Didn't seem to be flaky or problematic or low quality or anything like that.
No, and then they had this commercial.
I'm about to show you something new for Intellivision that will revolutionize the way video games are played and compared. First, here's a popular Atari game. Now don't look. And here's new Space Spartans for the Intellivoice module.
Hello, Commander.
Starbase 1 under attack. The battle is over.
New Intellivoice. Now that Intellivision talks, you can tell the difference with your eyes closed.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I thought as a kid, I mean, even my dad, who has zero interest in video games, when I fired a B-17 bomber, Christmas morning of '82, and he's a big World War II guy, so he was like, wow, this is pretty cool. They're talking.
Yeah, I think my dad was taken with the voice stuff as well. Yeah. So Bomb Squad, an Intellivoice game. How to describe the game? You're on the bomb squad. There has been they actually say a terrorist, an evil terrorist named Boris, has planted a time bomb that is ticking, and you are called to disable the bomb. Mm-hmm. And the mechanism by which that happens is you have to enter a code, and it's either a 1 or a 2 or 3 digit code, depending on the skill level or the type of game you've chosen. There's actually you can actually choose that separate from skill level. You could say I want to do a 1 digit or a 2 digit or a 3 digit code, and then you can also say I'd prefer a skill level of 1, 2, or 3 as well. So the idea is that there's let's say a 3-digit number that you're trying to input that will shut the bomb down. To find out what that number is, you're going to repair circuits, and the digits for the number are presented on the screen, and this is what's going to be hard to describe in an audio. So picture in your mind's eye a 4x5 cell grid that is 5 cells tall, 4 cells wide, and in that each of those little cells will either light up or not light up in the shape of a number. So number 1 is all lit up along the right edge. And then you draw 2 or you draw 3, all the digits, by lighting up little cells in this 4x5 grid. So what you're doing as the bomb diffuser is each of these little grid points represents a circuit. You'll enter that circuit, and you'll be told by the voice of Frank, your coach of some sort. You'll be told what to do to repair that circuit. Once you've repaired that circuit, then it will either light up or it will stay dark. And if it lights up, then that is a pixel of the drawn digit that you're trying to discover. If it stays dark, then you know that cell is not a pixel in the drawn digit you're trying to discover.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you just picture like an old style LED clock, with the red digits. And you've got the possibility to be any number in there. So it's a little bit blockier version of that. You're figuring out, okay, if I get a point here, that's got to be a 3,
Yeah. And the manual does a pretty good job of kind of coaching you into understanding what the goal is. They do actually a little bit of an example. Hey, I'm going to pick this cell, and that's going to tell me if it lights up. I know it has to be a 4, a 7, or whatever. So really the strategy in this game comes down to strategically choosing which cell to do next. And you're always hoping to, if you think about this very long, you're going to realize you want to pick cells that are always kind of dividing the choices left in half. So you've got 10 digits, and if you can pick a cell that is lit up in 5 digits and dark in 5 digits, then if you correctly get that circuit lit up, then you immediately have disqualified half the possibilities, and you're getting closer to finding out what that digit really is. And of course, if you do the math, you'll find out that you should need to do at most 4 circuits to determine any digit, and that has to do with the fact of here's where my computer sciencey stuff comes in. Maybe it's slightly propel ahead, I don't know, but a binary search algorithm is what you're basically applying here. And 3 guesses would disambiguate only 8 digits. You'd have to get a 4th guess to be able to get all 10. Although you may get lucky, and you may find out that after only 2 or 3 guesses that it's unique, depending on how you choose.
Disambiguate.
There you go. See,
Okay.
I went to college. I went to college once, you know.
And I believe they even let you guess what the number is just after 2 times going and fixing the circuits.
Yeah, you can guess, but don't guess wrong.
Yeah, once you've repaired 2 circuits, it does allow you to say, or do you want to make a stab at what this digit is? And after only 2 guesses, you would have to be pretty lucky, I think. I don't think that there's any way to pick only 2 cells and know what the digits are.
Yeah, the only time you really do that is if you're getting down to the wire and you're on your last one and you're like, it's either guess or die. So,
yeah, I guess I didn't mention there's a 30-minute simulated time clock that's ticking down. So if you're doing a 3-digit number, you don't want to spend more than 10 minutes of simulated time in any one of those 3, or you're going to get yourself behind and be in trouble. So in terms of repairing the circuits themselves, what you're actually doing is it takes you into this kind of a mock-up of what a circuit might be with these faux electronic parts in it. They look very bizarre.
Right. Lots of widgets.
I was playing this with my son looking over, and we had to refer to them by something. I'm like, okay, that's the fat letter E. That's the funny H. That's the sideways T. That's the hamburger. Just kind of giving that's the spaceship. Giving each little symbol a name. I'm sure they thought they were trying to get electronic-y looking things. Like, this looks like something you would see in a circuit. The only one that even looked even close to anything circuit-like in my mind was the thing I call the hamburger. It looks a little bit like the symbol for a capacitor, but
yeah,
almost looks like a coffee bean.
Yeah, I could see that.
And the interesting thing about the little parts that you mentioned is they're all sort of animated on the circuit board. And
right.
if you cut one, there's like a lead on each side, a wire. You cut one side, then it stops being animated, and then when you solder the other one in there, it actually becomes animated again.
So the techniques again for repairing the circuit are the voice will say, replace this part first, this second, and this one third. Or sometimes he'll say, replace this third, this first, this second. You have to actually listen to what he's telling you. And
it lights up the part as he says it.
Yeah.
And also he'll say, cut this out first, this second.
Right. Yeah. The other possibility is cut it out, in which case that's the easier choice, it turns out. You're cutting out a part and just replacing it with a rectangular gray thing, which is intended to be just a solder jumper short across the thing. So when you're replacing these parts, the trope that they used is you're always going to be replacing the part with either another part of the same color or another part that is a different color but the same shape. And you don't know when you enter the circuit which type of circuit this is. Is this a same shape kind of circuit or a same color type of circuit? But the whole circuit will be the same. So that first thing that you're replacing is where you're kind of making a guess. If I cut out a red sideways T-shaped thing, I know I'm either going to be putting in a red of some other shape, or I need to get a different colored T shape to stick in that spot. So you'll pull up your tool, the little cutters. You'll cut the leads on each side of it. Then you'll grab your little pliers and actually pull that thing out and drag it over and drop it on the side of the screen. And then you'll have to put the new piece in place with the pliers. And then you bring the soldering iron on and you solder it on each side. And at that point, you'll know whether you got it right. Because if you put the wrong part in place, it will tell you wrong part. The music or whatever the background it kicks into high gear, and the timer starts ticking faster. And so you start losing more time as you have to then immediately cut that part back out and put what you hope is another guess for the correct part in its place.
Yeah, and that also happens if you drop a piece before you get to the edge of the screen onto the circuit board somewhere. That'll cause the timer to start going and the music to double in speed and tempo.
Yeah, it kind of simulates that you've dropped something and it's shorting the system out somehow, causing bad things to happen. So that is the mechanics of it. And that is what I've described there is basically what would be considered skill level 1. You're either replacing or cutting out pieces as you go. Skill level 2 is the same thing, although they claim the action's a little faster. I'm guessing the clock's running down a little faster.
Your movements are faster in terms of being able to move.
I did notice things speed up a little bit. But starting in level 2, as time is moving on, at random times, one of the parts will start to overheat and could potentially cause a fire. And you'll have to pull a fourth tool out of your bag, as it were, a fire extinguisher, to cool that part back down again. And I think you have 8 or 9 seconds, depending on what skill level you're in, to get that thing sprayed with the fire extinguisher. And if you don't, then that circuit burns out. And you'll be kicked back to the main screen where you're looking at the grid again. But now you have no idea if the circuit you were on should be lit up or should have stayed dark. It's just a piece of information that's been removed from the from your attack on trying to figure out what this digit is. And that, of course, is problematic. So.
Yeah. And you do have the ability to move your tools fast or slow, or like a fine amount. There's one of the side buttons will speed that up. So you get into a kind of a rhythm. You cut out a part, you zip over to the side, you drop it, you zip back to kind of where you need to be with the other tool, and then you slow down. And it's a bizarre concept. If you've never played the game or never seen it, what we're talking about probably sounds like just like a crazy, wacky game that makes no sense. But as you get into it, it does.
Yeah. It's definitely pretty unique gameplay wise. I think it's and certainly in terms of the type of game it is.
Oh, totally! I don't remember anything even remotely like this.
And then the third skill level picks up the speed yet one more notch. You have the possibility of parts overheating and needing to spray them with a fire extinguisher, but you also have the this effect of we should kind of mention sound effects are all going on. You'll hear a siren going past. It's as if emergency vehicles are maybe evacuating the area or something like that. But you just keep hearing like a siren that increases in volume and then decreases again, as if the a vehicle is passing you as you're working on something. And when that happens in level 3. Sometimes, not every time, but sometimes it will actually vibrate. The screen does vibrate, and a part from your part list that is actually at the top of the screen will fall out down at a random spot in the circuit, causing the short circuiting again, and it'll cause a speeding up of the timer, and you'll have to stop whatever you're doing, grab that piece, and again, I think you have something on the order of some small number of seconds to get that piece off the grid, or it'll blow that circuit, and you'll again not have the ability to know if that circuit should have been on or off in your in terms of lighting up to determine what the number is that you're trying to get.
And you're also being taunted by the bombers. They'll never do it in time.
Yes,
it won't be easy.
You're right.
Yes, this I think is a really good use of the Intellivoice. This game here.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it really is a. Like one of the, I don't know, there were only 4 or 5 of these games, but I really consider this like in my mind, it's the best example.
I think so. And I think this was, I mean, I loved B-17 Bomber, but I think this was probably my most go-to game on the Intellivoice as a kid.
Yeah. So that is kind of the game. You get points for, replacing a part, and you get 1,000 points when you guess the correct digit of the code that you're trying to guess, and if you win the game and disarm the bomb, you get another 2,000 point bonus. But as a kid, I was never playing for scores. I was always just trying to beat it.
Right, because when you beat the game, then you get the you did it, you're a hero, and you get the fireworks over the what looks like the like a beachfront kind of ocean with buildings in the background, and the
that's so
theme song plays.
That's so funny. You see that as a beachfront. See, well, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I assumed it was a river.
Could be. Yeah. I mean, you see the reflection of the fireworks in the water, so clearly it's water.
It's a real nice effect. Yeah.
And then as opposed to you screw up and you guess the wrong thing, and then you get the oh no, and then the whole city explodes, and you're just like, oh, rubble, nice.
Yes, so at some point you're actually having to you're going to guess the number for that digit or whatever, and you actually enter that thing, and I as a kid I always remember just a little bit of okay.
Yeah, because you put it in there and he said, "Are you sure?"
Yeah, are you sure about this? I remember I was just kind of half holding my breath every time I would enter one, even when I was positive it has to be this number. I was still like, man, did I make a mistake? Have I screwed this thing up?
On the first level, they actually, when you put that number in, they'll highlight what the number is on there.
Yeah.
So you can double check to see if you have the right ones lit
do
up.
I have any green that's not on the
right?
But on levels 2 and 3, they don't do that.
Right. So I distinctly remember as a kid looking and analyzing the shapes of these numbers to come up with this, what I described before, this kind of optimal path to guess the different grid locations that I should go to next. And I remember I had this all down that I would start at, row 3, column 4, and I would check that first. And if it's lit up, then I know I need to go check the bottom left corner. And if that's lit up, then but if it's dark, then I should go over here and check that one next. And trying to get down to, again, a minimum number of work to be able to identify the digit. And so of course I reproduced that effort recently as I was playing this game, and I wrote it up in a little diagram, what I'm calling like a decision tree, where if you do this first, and if it's lit up, then do this, versus if it's dark, do that. And again, within 4 guesses, you're going to know within 4 cells, I should say, of working out, you're going to be able to know what the number is. And I'll gladly donate that to the community.
Yes, Rick's cheat sheet.
Yes, but it was interesting. As I played this again, I'm confident that as a kid, I never played off of any level except level 1. Because I know this is how I attack the game all the time, was with this little algorithmic cheat sheet thing to get to walk you through the decisions you need to make. But then as I'm playing it again as an adult, and the first time a fire started in my circuit, I did not get the canister lined up correctly, and pop, the circuit burnt out. And now I'm screwed. My decision tree is based on the fact that whether that cell was light or dark, and now I don't know.
So Rick, you just sat there paralyzed until the timer ran out?
No, of course I grabbed the manual and heroically started figuring something else out.
Yeah, it's great that they put the numbers in the manual too.
Oh yeah,
like they show you exactly what ones are supposed to be lit up, except for that 7. Yeah. They put it. They added an extra one on there.
Yeah, I remember that throwing you. But yeah, I would have that. I'd have the manual open to that page whenever I played the game. But I remember a friend of mine playing it like the first couple of times, and he just didn't get the concept, and he's just like going 1 square at a time, adjacent squares. I'm like, no,
Oh,
you gotta go down here. What? No, I just want to do this. I just want to do the diffusing the circuit thing. And no. But
yeah, my brother played this when he was younger, and he could not understand this at all.
It was a complicated game, and if you're trying to explain it to your 10 or 11-year-old friend who doesn't want to read the manual, and you just started playing it yourself, it's.
I think he was 6 or 7 at the time.
Oh, impressive! He even wanted to try.
I was still able to do it at about 9 or 10.
22 minutes till blast. Left, more. Okay.
So the manual actually goes into a little bit about, how to make good choices, and, kind of, you don't want to go cell by cell all the way across, kind of a thing. They actually highlight what they call a bad choice. And they mention, you really shouldn't test this circuit because this circuit is not used in any of the digits in the patterns for any of the digits. So this is useless. And there's actually 3 little cells in the grids that aren't on any of the digits at all.
Those are the ones my friend went after.
Of course. Again, some of the, I guess the strategy, again, we talked about before is trying to wisely pick these cells so that you're actually getting information that helps you eliminate some of the numbers and help you hone in on what the digit is you're trying to guess.
I do remember playing on the higher levels because I distinctly remember the fire extinguisher and the shaking and the parts falling.
I think I was afraid of it. It's decently nerve-wracking because it's in a high intensity type of game. This timer's ticking down, and you've got to do things. And when you make any kind of mistake, it ramps up that timer. And
that's a stressful game. It really is.
Yeah. We mentioned when we were kind of doing some planning for this that this game to me really strikes me as one that might benefit from an overhaul with a touch interface, because you're doing so much click it feels like a mouse kind of thing. You're doing a click drag kind of thing with these tools. Drag over here. It seems like it would be on a touch screen. You would just touch the component you want to do, and a menu might pop up, cut or whatever. I don't know. But instead of dragging things back and forth, up and down around the screen, it seems like this would benefit from a user interface changeover where you're just saying, put that here.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. That might actually be the one game in existence that would be good for a touchpad. The one retro game, I should say. Well, I don't know. As we know, I'm not a big fan of that kind of gaming. But yeah, that's interesting. I wonder, is that game available on anything like that? It was a DS, but it was controlled with a DS controller. They're not touch, right? I never played it on there.
Yeah, the DS one, the touch controls are only used for where the digital pad was, where the numbers were.
So you've played it on there. What do you think of it on the DS, Will?
I really like it. It's a lot easier to hit the buttons and get what you're supposed to be doing, but there are some glitches in it, including the timer. He'll tell you in the original game, he'll tell you like 28 minutes till blast or 10 minutes till blast. The numbers don't show up in the DS version. It'll say minutes till blast. And I mean, you can look right up top and see how much longer you have, so it's not really that much of a problem. The other glitch I noticed was the cityscape, whether you win or lose, almost looks like it's nighttime. For some reason, the skyline doesn't appear on it. One thing I noticed was they'll mention, what's the phrase that they say? Wrong part, resolder. I've never heard it say resolder.
No, I have. I always thought he said like resolder it, but I think resolder is...
I've heard it say wrong part.
Yeah, I've heard it say wrong part. I never heard it say resolder.
I have heard it say that, but I can't think of the circumstance where he says that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I think he says it if you have the part not correctly in position and you solder it anyway.
Maybe. That brings up another point. How far over can you actually have the parts before? Like, if it's the correct part, but you have it over too far, will it screw up? Like, will it start counting the timer down more?
There's a fine line there. You can be off a little bit, but it has to be relatively in the, I don't know how many pixels.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really noticed it.
Well, one thing that really frustrated me was I put it up on the highest skill level to try that. And at each skill level, everything is ramped up in speed. I think the timer's ticking faster, but your tool movement is also faster.
Yes.
For me, I found that at level 3, it was too fast for me to get the accuracy that I needed to actually put the tool in the right spot. And so I'm going left, and it says right more, and I go to the right, left more, left more, right more. As I keep moving this tool, I'm just tapping the disc as gently as I can, and it's jumping like 5 pixels at a time. And I just I could barely control the thing. I found myself having to like go all the way across the screen and come like a running start at it and try to stop.
It would have been nice if on the 3rd difficulty, if that button that increases your speed actually slowed you down.
Yeah, because I needed finer control than what I was able to get on level 3. And I to me, level 3 is hardly playable because of that. You spend so much time fighting with the controls, and that's not really testing your skill in the game.
Yeah.
I was able to complete 1 digit on level 3.
I actually threw it on level 3 just to see what it was like, and it was also my, hey, I'm going to show my 4-year-old what happens when the bomb explodes. So I didn't really care that much.
Yeah, that's easy to do. Doesn't take any time at all.
Yeah, I did 3 digits on level 1. I think I attempted 3 digits on skill level 2, and then I just attempted 1 digit on skill level 3.
I think as a kid, 1 digit on 3 was about the best you could do. And I do remember playing, I think I probably played level 2 mostly as a kid. Because I did like the fire extinguisher possibility, even though it was frustrating as hell when you have that piece and you're about to bring it over and then all of a sudden, I got to drop that.
Yeah.
But you do have an unlimited number of replacement parts at the top. So if you grab one and you drop it, the same one is still there.
Yeah, it's just about something to make it unnerve you a little bit more and waste time to make it just that much harder. And I guess I didn't mention this. As you move up in the skill levels, in any given circuit that you're repairing, like on level 1, you'll repair maybe, what does it say, 1 or 2 pieces of the circuit. Whereas if you get up to level 3, you might have to replace 5 pieces in the circuit. So it's just a lot more work to to do what you have to do.
And it uses action buttons on both sides of the controller, so your fingers are getting a workout on this one.
Yeah, and this is one that uses all of them distinctly. Like a lot of games, all 4 buttons will jump or something like that. In this game, the top 2 buttons are the speed up, but the left button is what uses the tool. The right button is what you use to drop the thing. So you're constantly kind of fidgeting around which button you're pushing.
And all the keypad buttons are used too for different functions, different tools.
Yeah, this is definitely a game I think that would be difficult to do without the overlay. Although I guess in the frenzy of it all, you start to remember which is which. But I still had to look down to figure out which one was the fire extinguisher, because you're not using that all the time.
That's one of those overlays that ends up getting fingernail marks in it because you're just jabbing at buttons so fast and moving around.
Yeah, the only button that's not used is 0, except for when you're putting 0 in as your number.
Mm-hmm. Right. Everything else has you're using it to pick a tool, or you're using it to exit the circuit to go back to the screen or whatever it is.
But you really do get into kind of a rhythm when you play it, and if someone's watching you doing all these things on that controller, it's probably kind of surprising that you can do it. But you kind of memorize, like you said, where the buttons are, and you just instinctively go to the right thing most of the time, not all the time, but
yeah. So the game, I'm going to talk a little bit about the packaging. So the Intellivoice games, at least the ones that I'm familiar with, the original release, all had a nice gold label with black writing on them, which I think was unique to the Intellivoice games.
Yeah.
And a different color box. So
kind of a cream-colored box.
Yeah, these are really nice boxes.
Yeah, they're gatefold, and I think we mentioned this when we were talking about boxes for some other game, but they, rather than have the large slit in the gatefold to put your manual in, you actually slide the manual into the cover, like from the binding area, and there's a much smaller slit to put your overlays in.
Right, and the manuals are larger than the typical Intellivision manuals.
Yeah, just a different kind of a different styling there.
Yeah.
But they're really nice boxes. My copy of Bomb Squad, the box shows just real minor wear. It's really held up well.
Yeah, the box, when I opened mine, the overlays don't look like they've really been used, but they also still had these little sheets in between each overlay.
I remember that. They put a little paper in between them.
Yep. This copy still had those.
I have a few. I think I have a sealed copy of each of the Intellivoice games, but my original copies are still in good shape too. Although the overlay does have some fingernail marks on it, I have to admit.
Pretty sure I still have a sealed copy of a game. I just can't remember which one at the moment.
So just some other things that we typically talk about when we do game rundowns. In terms of it being rare, it is not very rare. One of the sites we go to didn't actually list a rarity on this one, but Digital Press gives it a 2, where 10 means very rare, 1 means very, very common. So a 2 means it's pretty easy to get a hold of. It's also on the Intellivision Rocks CD from IntellivisionLives.com. That's a way to get a hold of the ROM legally. In terms of games ratings. So we like to mention a few rating websites. INTV Funhouse, which gives 3 scores by graphics, sound, and replayability. He gives it a 3 on the graphics, 4 on the sound, and 4 on replayability. I guess the graphics are, in terms of like those electronic components, they're a little blocky.
Yeah.
But I don't find it like graphically unappealing. But so he kind of gave it a middle of the road.
They're better looking than the beta version.
Yeah.
The one in the pamphlet, yeah.
Yeah, with the cheese wedges and
the Video Game Critic, which we like to cite from time to time as well, he gave it a C. He grades from like A+ to F. He gave it a C, kind of middle of the road. I think he faults it for some repetitive gameplay. There is a lot of repetition in it. You're dragging the part over, and each circuit is going to be the same thing that you're doing. You're either replacing or cutting out, and so it's just the mechanics of what you're doing are kind of repetitive. But although it's, we were kind of talking about this before we started recording, he mentions on his site that he didn't think that the voice was all that necessary see how do you put it here? Uses IntelliVoice synthesis, but it isn't really essential to the gameplay. I can't imagine why he would say that.
I've seldom ever agree with him and his reviews, so don't know the guy personally, but I don't know. Sometimes the things he writes about games, it's like, did you even play the game? Did you even turn it on? Do you have any clue what you're talking about?
He's done a lot of games, so you kind of wonder if at some point he was doing a ton.
Quantity doesn't equate to quality.
You absolutely need it too. If they're flashing, it says cut this one fourth, this one first, this one second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you should actually play the game, Video Game Critic, and then we'll maybe re-rate it.
I just wonder if he, at some point in his past, just was trying to get a lot of content out, and wasn't paying attention. Because it's definitely not the case. You have to have the sound for this to make any sense at all. The voice, I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I guess my criticisms of it would fall into like I said, the control issues I mentioned about level 3, and it is decently repetitive. The mechanics of what you're doing on each of these circuits is kind of repetitive. So I would not put it in the top 10 games ever for the system, but it's a pretty good game.
I would actually put it on my top 10 list. I don't know exactly what position it would be on. Maybe like a 7 or an 8. Okay. Just because I played it so much and it was such a novelty to have that in 82 with the talking and everything. It stands up for me. I still like the game today. So
I certainly enjoyed it, but I did notice myself thinking, okay, we're going to do this again, and okay, we're going to do this again, and so I kind of got that feeling of, okay, this is getting old in terms of the just the mechanics.
Yeah, it is a lot of the same thing, but you find yourself you're thinking about all these different aspects of it. Is this going to be the right? Am I going to diffuse this one? So is it going to be lit up? I got to memorize. I'm doing color now, or no, I'm doing shapes now, and it keeps your mind going the whole time you're playing the game.
That's true. You cannot be lazy on this game, mentally or dexterity wise.
Right.
Yeah, there have been times where I've pulled the piece out and I've dropped it. And I'm like, oh shoot, what was the color of that?
Right. Yep. Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm talking out. It's funny. I'm talking out loud as I'm playing it. My 4-year-old sitting there beside me watching. I'm going, okay, this is a red T, so we're going to either get a T or a red. And I'm just talking the whole time as I'm doing it, because I don't want to forget the next piece of it.
Well, how does that work for you, Will? Because you have color deficiencies in your vision, right?
I'm able to see them pretty well. They use some colors in there that I could actually see.
Oh, okay.
Another little side fun thing we've mentioned a few times: the Angry Video Game Nerd Double Vision episodes. This is one of the games that he highlights in that video, and it's the last game he does, and he's acting very confused, like, what? I'm doing what now? I'm replacing, and the timer's ticking down, and he's looking up, and he does a graphic of the actual television exploding at him as he gets thrown backwards as Bomb Squad explodes, to end the Intellivision reviews he was doing. It's kind of amusing.
Yeah.
The code, figure out the code. Are you sure? Oh no.
We're going to hear a little bit now from Keith Robinson and Joey Silvian, who was, as I mentioned before, both worked on the game, were involved in the Intellivoice stuff. And then we'll come back and wrap things up. Enjoy the interview.
Intellivision game designer interview.
So today we're talking to Joey Silvian, who worked at Mattel Electronics from 1979 till the closing in 84. He was the creative media manager, directed all the Intellivoice games, and also did a lot of work on the programs for the original keyboard component. And we're also speaking to Keith Robinson, who was at Mattel from 81 to 84. Obviously, one of the original Blue Sky Rangers. Tron Solar Sailor was his game, which I am a fan of. And currently the president of Intellivision Productions, and I'm sure you all know Keith. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hey, hello. How you doing?
Doing well. So we want to talk about Bomb Squad today, but I think we want to start with the whole Intellivoice and how that came about, and some stories behind that.
Well, the Intellivoice really came about because General Instruments was the company that did the microprocessor, and they did the voice, the sound chip and everything, and they called up and said, hey, we've got this voice chip thing. You should put that in your games too. And Mattel said, okay. So that's kind of how it started.
The challenge for doing those games was you couldn't. The challenge was to make the game voice dependent, so that you couldn't really play the game without either a voice cue or a voice warning, or the voice would give you a cue as to what you should do. So that was I'd never seen anything quite like that. But
marketing demanded that, and see, there were some of us who argued that the voice should be an enhancement, because if it's an enhancement, then all 3 million Intellivision owners might buy it. But if you make it so you have to have it, then maybe only the 150,000 or 200,000 Intellivoice owners have it, which is what happened. And that's why they always insisted it's got to be integral to the game until we did the final one, which is the World Series Major League Baseball, which is an enhancement. You don't need it to play the game.
Right.
But it sure is cool with it.
Absolutely. And now, you guys, the Intellivoice came out before the Odyssey 2 made their voice unit, didn't it? Or do you recall? And their unit was something that sat on top of the Odyssey, and it had its own speaker.
Yeah,
But I don't recall those voices being, integral to the game. They were just on top. You didn't have to have it.
And I don't know how they did it either, because the way the voices were done, you see, the memory is crazy. Memory was so expensive back then. But the very first voice game that we did, Space Spartans, that was an 8K game, of which 4K, and I think they finally went to like 5K because they just couldn't, they had to fit more words in there. It was 5K of that was voice. That's 5K. It's like, as some people point out, you can't do a sound effect. In fact, actually, at one time I realized that because the way that Macs grab space to reserve it for stuff, that on a Mac, I don't think you can have a file that's less than 5K in size. I think you can't have one that's less than like 50K or something like that. I forget what it is. The minimum is on a Mac. But so we had an entire game. You had to do the gameplay and all these voices and everything.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So when they went to Bomb Squad, I believe they went to 12K on Bomb Squad.
And the challenge was taking making the voice sound like it was a real voice with like no data.
Yeah.
So we spent hours and hours. Like, I remember Bomb Squad it sounded like Bomb Wad. Everybody walked around going Bomb Wad, and it was like, that's what it said. Until people just worked on it and tried to make the words sound like they actually were real words.
And they actually went on tests that they had like an auditorium and played these things, and people wrote down what they heard. But yeah, the voices, because of that data, you had a sample, a data rate that it was feeding the information. And like, I forget, consonants took more data than vowels did. So they actually edited the words. So in the middle of words, they would switch the data rate because, okay, we need the sound or the ch sound or whatever. And that takes a higher rate than the ah sound. So they were actually editing within words to get this in there.
And it was based on an actual recording of a voice, but it wasn't. It was like a synthesized version of that person's style of speaking.
It was a real voice. Right.
The sound chip itself had a mathematical model in it of the human larynx and vocal cords. And so when they got a voice, they kind of studied that. There was machinery we had. There were machines that would plug it in and computers that would come out with, okay, here's the 17 parameters to fit into our model of the human vocal cavity there. And that will make the thing sound like the person. So an actor would come in and would say something. And so they could strip out figure out those parameters, and that way, only with the data rate of the words themselves, the phonemes of the parts of the words, they could then make it sound like that. So you needed the actor to the actual they would strip off the what you needed to make the voice sound that way, and then once you had that off of there, you just had what was left for the performance itself. So the performance and the voice were separate. And as I remember, when they recorded somebody, they did. The people came in for auditions, and then they gave the tapes to the voice people back in Hawthorne, who then put them through the processors and said, this voice works, this voice doesn't, because some people's voices were better suited to it than others.
Interesting.
Right. We had a bunch of parameters when we were recording, like throaty voices wouldn't work if they were kind of hoarse and throaty. And I don't remember, but there was a whole bunch of stuff that even while we were recording, if it went over the line in terms of what those requirements were, we direct the actor to change his voice to match those requirements for the chip, actually.
It was a mess.
And then, and for Bomb Squad, it's like kind of some of the voices like an English accent. Was that someone faking an English accent, or was it, yeah?
Although
there was
One of my favorite stories on B-17 or not B-17 Bomber, the space shuttle game that was never released. Joey was casting, and Joey, you wanted to get a guy who actually sounded like the real mission control guys. You wanted a guy from Houston who would really sound that way. And they actually
flew him.
They flew him in.
Wow.
Yeah.
They flew him in.
They were, we had some really cool things, but one of probably the clearest thing I remember is we had the voice of Woody Woodpecker. That game never came out that I know of either. And we had Grace Lance come in. She was like 80. I don't know, around 80, and who knows that Walter Lance's wife was the voice of Woody Woodpecker, so we recorded her. It was
and
one of the coolest things.
That's on the Intellivision Rocks collection.
We were just checking that out.
We have the outtakes from that, so we have her voice on there.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
We have your voice on there too, Joey, because you're directing the Quest, which later became the Tower of Doom, was going to be an Advanced Dungeons & Dragons voice game, and we actually have the actor saying stuff, and then the click, and you coming in and directing it.
We could put some of that in the episode with your approval, if you like.
Sure, yeah.
I think so. Yeah, it'd be great.
All right.
How do I get to hear that? Aside from
Listen to this. I'll send you a copy of the of Intellivision Rocks.
And I'll
send one to you, Joey. Everybody else can hear it by just going to our website and buying Intellivision Rocks, available now on our website. But you'll get a complimentary one, Joey.
Very nice.
Thank you.
They'll be looking for us.
When the idea for Intellivoice was put forward, what was the decision to what kind of games we need to make? A space game, we need to make a
there was a brainstorming session. In fact, I've got the notes for the brainstorming session where
nice.
Marketing was there and some of the programmers were there, and they came out, and these games came out from we should do a game like this and a game like this, like that. And some of them came out very strangely. There was one person said, hey, we should do something like a harbor, and you're the harbor master doing it. That's the game that became B-17 Bomber. Wow. So yes, it kind of went through, mainly because the programmer who was working on it, John Soule, didn't think a harbor master was a very exciting thing. But yeah, they so really it did come about that. It kind of came out and said, we need this type of game, this type of game, and this type of game, and they started working on it. Joey, I think that one of the main complaints I kept hearing from you and from Brad Gagley, who was, I guess, worked for you as a writer there.
Yeah.
Was that great? We have voice now. We can put in scripts and do this whole thing, and they kept chopping them down until you finally got 20 words into the thing.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's a 20-word script. So what could you do? Warnings. They'll never do it in time, or or in the bomb squad, it was interesting. It was kind of like if you were blind, give you commands like cut this and drag this. And it was kind of an interesting concept that you had to put together. First of all, we didn't know how to disarm a bomb, so we kind of had to make up. We were looking at stuff like Keith. You mentioned
the movie Juggernaut. I think it was called Juggernaut, which was about a bomb on a luxury liner or something like that, and they were trying to.
Right, they just showed trying to some guy in there nobody ever knew. So we just figured out, well, there must be a bunch of circuits, and they got to cut something or they have to move something around, and so we just said, okay, well then we'll give them a sequence. They cut this, move that, do this, and then that sequence will disarm the bomb. If you could either remember it, you have to remember the sequence, or understand, or move the cursor around to do all that stuff. So.
Yeah, I remember as a 12-year-old or 13-year-old, whatever I was, being sufficiently impressed with the circuitry that I thought I was disarming a bomb. So,
Bomb Squad was interesting. Bomb Squad was, I think, of any of the games we released for Intellivision, was the one that was really most the puzzle type of game. If you like Sudoku, you would love Bomb Squad. It wasn't so much an action, fly around, blow stuff up. This was one where you actually had to figure out the pattern and kind of say, did I do this one next? If I do kind of strategy and everything that way.
Yeah.
Now, was that... that couldn't have been part of the original idea. Do you know who came up with that, Joey? No,
it was Kai and I.
Kai, okay.
Kai Tran, we sat in a room and figured out how could we make this a game? And it was like, okay, well, let's figure out. We tell people how to do this, and so we had to make up. Obviously, we didn't know the circuitry of a bomb. How you would what you'd have to do, and so we created all these tasks. Like a task list of all the stuff that you would have to do, and then just kind of presented that in different kinds of ways. So that's that was the only way. It was like, well, how could you do it? There's no that was the clearest way that we could figure out. I mean, we had the task of doing a disarm the bomb game, so it was like, well, let's go inside the circuit and see if we can. It's like a different kind of Tron in a way, but
yeah. And in each circuit that you would disarm or clear or fix, then you'd go back and you'd look at the grid of the digit that you're trying to decipher to decode the whole thing and save the city. And of course, if you did it like the hardest level, you had 3 digits and multiple circuits to go into.
That game could drive you nuts, especially with the music in the background.
Oh yeah, it's very frenetic. It's just crazy.
Some music going constantly, like and then sirens going through.
Oh yeah, it was pretty crazy.
I feel sorry. I apologize right now to any of the parents out there for the kids who had that game, who were in the other room cooking or reading the newspaper, and they just keep hearing. You did it! You're the hero.
I'm sure my dad had me turn the TV down a few times.
I think those were European sirens too. I don't think they had sirens U.S. because it was like I never heard those. I mean, they
they had that nice little Doppler effect on them too, as they change in pitch as they go by.
Yeah. Very funny. Yeah, Joey, why don't you talk a little about anybody who has read any of the stuff on our website that I was kind of in charge of writing. It starts from 1981, where Mattel Electronics had really separated off from, the Intellivision department had really separated off from design and development, Richard Chang's group.
Right.
But Richard Chang's group is where the Intellivision really started, and Kai worked for that group, and you worked for that group originally. So, see, I never really knew Kai because he stayed in design and development.
Right. Well, actually, I was hired to develop programs for the keyboard because in '79 they knew that they were going to they wanted to come out with a keyboard. So we really started off with. I mean, at that point, APH was doing the handheld games. I don't know if there was anybody on staff, maybe a couple people doing the handheld games, but
Ray Kessner started there, and Mike Minkoff. Mike Minkoff and Ray Kessner were both doing handheld games before the Intellivision.
Rick Levine, too, when I interviewed him, he said he started off doing a handheld bowling before he did the first bowling with Mike on the Intellivision.
Okay, so those were it was small. I remember 10 or 12 people there, and I remember that people were like shooting rubber bands and paper clips all over the place. So I went out and I bought these foam kind of mattress things, and I surrounded my desk with this like foam fort. So I couldn't shoot the paper clips and stuff at eye level. They had to like go over the fort to get me.
Nice.
Yeah, some work did get done.
Yeah, but it was like, I just turned in an expense report for this foam thing, and it was bad, crazy, and they paid it.
Oh, gee, nice.
Nice.
Very nice.
We'll pay for it.
Yeah, boy, and in our side, we usually paid for our own pranks.
Well, that's when they got more bureaucratic.
Yeah.
You're going to pay for it.
So what kind of stuff, Joey, then with the keyboard component, was this like early in the development of it?
The first thing I remember was the Jack-o'-lane exercise thing, and I was working with APH, and it was like, how could we do this? And so we hired a person who actually turned out later to be one of my daughter's professors at the University of Michigan in exercise physiology that was a consultant. So we worked with him as like how we designed a thing that would diagnose how fit you were. And that was like do a bunch of push-ups, and you'd measure how many push-ups you could do and do sit-ups, and then measure your pulse, and you put all this data in. And it would say, okay, in order to get more fit, you need to do 20 push-ups instead of 15 push-ups, or you need to do, 20 sit-ups instead of 5 sit-ups, or whatever the prescription was. And then there'd be an animated Jack, which was really good animation. I could barely believe it even for those days.
Yeah.
And Jack would do it with you. So it'd say, okay, and he would count. And while you would be doing the, sit-ups and push-ups, he would be there on the screen doing it with you.
So yeah, that was a great thing about the keyboard component as opposed to the Intellivoice, is there you didn't have this memory restriction, because the keyboard component, actually the programs were on cassette tape, and like Joey said, it was really remarkable for the time. It's like had 4 tracks on it, and one track was the voice, and one track was some of it was digital, some was analog, and it had the computer all figure this out. I think that David Rolfe, who was really the first programmer on Intellivision, was the guy who kind of most supervised that stuff or most programmed it. And so like in the French lesson 1, when Mimi is talking, her lips, are nicely synchronized to the voice. And you didn't have that limitation of, we only have 20 words here. You could actually write something and record it.
But was the audio just coming from the audio portion of the cassette?
Yes. Yes, it was
that
that.
was just
none of this digitized stuff
Yeah.
voice that time. That was just analog voice.
Yeah, but it was all synchronized up.
Yeah, they had on the digital side, they had the cues of where different things were. So how long to play and when stop and when the voice would stop like that. So
I mean,
the other tracks would actually have the timings that the program would be loaded in, and then it was brilliant. It was really brilliant. The machine is actually, it was like it's in some ways, if you look at the memory map of the keyboard component was more intelligently put together than the DOS for PC, because on DOS they said 640K, that's the most memory anybody will ever need. And so DOS is set up with a memory map that only has that 640, and then they had to kind of start making high end. But the Intellivision was designed that if you started adding memory to it, I forget how many, like 36 meg to this thing or something like that, had you really wanted to, because the memory map was open-ended for adding memory.
Now, that brings to mind something that Rick Levine said, that like the development kits you had were essentially Intellivisions with expanded memory to do some of the games early on.
Yes, we could do, well, the memory map of the Intellivision, I think, could only handle 20 or 24K of games. And then we had paging ROMs. That was a different thing, came in later. But we could go up to that limit. So even if you're working on a 6K or 8K game, you really had that 20K, 24 to play with, and then most people programmed a game and it came out to be like 15K, and then the rest of the time was spent trying to chop it down.
I had to say one thing about the Jack LaLanne game was that, I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with Jack LaLanne, but he could pull boats across the harbor
with his teeth.
Japan, but he couldn't see the words. But when we had him in to record the scripts, it was like we had to put like tons of lights on the script. And here's this guy that could drag boats across the harbor, but he couldn't see the words.
Wow!
So it was kind of a bizarre thing.
That I hadn't heard.
I wonder if that must have been kind of an unusual concept for people to grasp then in recording that stuff, because 79 or whatever, like, this is going to do what now?
No, most of those people didn't understand. I mean, all he did was have to really read the script and it was do this, and he didn't know, but we had all that voice space, we could kind of use his full voice and just access it as we needed it. So
I remember too that before 1970 there were no video games, no arcade games, none of this interactive screen stuff before 1970. So those of us who were working at Mattel, we hadn't grown up with it, so it was like new to us also.
Yeah, you're inventing it as you worked.
Right, so it's like, hey, whenever they come in somebody new, like, hey, we can do this, we can do that. It's like, wow, you can do that. So it was actually very exciting.
Yeah, and that keyboard component had its own dedicated 6502 processor in there.
Yes. It was essentially it was like you had an Apple II with a Intellivision inside of it.
Yeah, but the Intellivision could tap into that and vice versa.
Yeah, but they only did that for very few games.
Yeah.
Most of the games they released for the keyboard component were just done in BASIC and were just basic cartridges.
So it had its own, like the Jack LaLanne game, it had its own cartridge and the tape along with it kind of thing, or did the tape load it into?
Just the tape.
The tape loaded it into. Okay, that makes sense.
But
tape.
because the keyboard component itself had a huge amount of memory in it, and they could load it into that. And in fact, when the keyboard component was discontinued, they bought them back as much as they could. As much as they could, they wanted to get it back from all the consumers, anyone that's gotten out. It's only like 2,000 went out. They tried to get back as many as they could and tell everybody, we're not going to support this anymore. They didn't want people then coming back, suing them like 3 years later because we hadn't released anything more for it. So they bought it back and said, what are we going to do with these things? Well, it's got a lot of memory in there. Plugs into an Intellivision. Let's use that as a development system. So they just essentially put a serial port on the back of it and started pumping in stuff from a VAX, digital equipment computer, time-sharing computer. And so you develop something on the VAX and boom, it would shoot into your keyboard component, and then you could look at it on the screen.
Nice. So, Joey, what other you did voice work then for all the Intellivoice games?
Yeah. I spent maybe it was a year, almost, well, at least close to full time at a studio on Hollywood Boulevard. With Fred Jones, working on auditioning these people and then bringing them in, and then it was kind of, if you think about it, like a lot of effort and energy for 20 or 25 words in the end. I mean, it was like an interesting thing.
And some of our voice people went on to bigger and better things. The most famous one I can think of is Corey Burton. Do you know about Corey Burton, Joey?
No, I don't.
Well, he was the one who came in and did the voice Tron at the beginning of Tron Solar Sailor.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very funny because when he did that, he said, we want this real voice like that in the movie. And he goes, okay, so he actually lit up a cigarette, even though he said he didn't smoke. And he kept puffing the cigarette to try to get his voice irritated so he could really make Tron sound. And so we were sitting there in the recording booth watching him go, Tron. Okay. Tron. So it was hilarious. We're watching this guy kill himself in the room.
Oh, geez.
But if you're familiar with the actor, voice actor Paul Frees, Paul Frees was the voice of a lot of stuff at Disneyland. And Paul Frees died a few years ago. And Corey Burton now is actually licensed by the Paul Frees family to do the voices for Disneyland. So when Disneyland needs something changed, like for the Haunted Mansion, the host in the Haunted Mansion that you hear as you're driving through, that's Paul Frees. So if they need a change, Corey Burton comes in because he can do Paul Frees' voice exactly. So, the grinning ghosts are happy to see you. I mean, he drops that right in. They can cut it in with Paul Frees. So he's Corey Burton's all over Disneyland now.
Didn't know that.
And he started with Tron. Actually, he'd been doing voice. He'd been doing cartoons before that.
Now, Joey, how was that? Like, you get these pristine studio recordings of these, these voiceovers, and then by the time it finally makes it onto the actual Intellivoice, I mean, what were your thoughts about that? Like, just what had to be done?
Yeah, as Keith had talked about playing it to bunches of audience, we did. I remember playing it to individuals, and it was really like, does that word sound like, is bomb wad? Can we make it sound like squad? How do we make it sound like squad? Because what we got is wad.
Right.
And so, people would work on trying to, they'd spend hours. Not only do we spend hours in the recording session to get 20 words, hours or days sometimes to get it right so that it could be processed. And then when people got it, they had to work on it to take out data, because usually it's too big. The files were too big. They had to take out data and take out so much data that it still had to sound like a word, yet not take up the space Keith was talking about earlier in the cartridge. So that was the challenge, that it sounded like real speech, yet, how small can you make the data? How little data can you use to make it sound like a word? So,
right.
So it was kind of like a really long process when you think about it to end up with 20 or 25 words.
And in some cases, the context would help you. For example, saying bomb or whatever, it says it while the words bomb squad are on the screen. So that kind of helps the mind hear it. So even if the voice hears bomb squad, the mind will fill in a little bit because it sees it right there on screen.
Right. Now, when it came to your game, Keith, Solar Sailor, how did you come up with the voice ideas for that, or was that Joey, or were you guys working together on that, or do you
Don
remember?
Daglow started that game, and so I guess Joey had. There was a script when I came in because I took over for Don Daglow because he'd been promoted. They didn't have anybody to work on the game. I had been talking to the people who do the special effects for Tron, so when I showed up, they said, "Hey, do Tron." But again, the script had way too many things in it, and so it's immediately like, okay, that's going to go, that's going to go, that's going to go. What can we cut here? Because you want to have the stuff, as Joey said, you had to make it. It was a demand. You had to have the voice to be able to play. But then you didn't want the voice just to be about that. You wanted some things. So each game has some stuff in it to kind of just there for atmosphere. Just like with the characters in Bomb Squad. They'll never do it in time. That sort of thing.
Right.
They'll be looking for us.
Right.
That's just for atmosphere. And the same way in B-17 bomber. B-17 bomber and all that. So the same thing. You wanted to keep some stuff in there for that. So you had to cut a lot of stuff out, but you didn't want to cut everything from one or the other side of it.
Yeah, but it all added to the effect, even if it wasn't necessary. Because I remember just being incredibly drawn in, and my dad was never into video games at all, but he was a World War II buff, or is, I should say. And I remember him just being like caught up in that whole thing, because it was like Christmas '82 that I got the Intellivoice, and I got B-17, and I got Bomb Squad and Space Spartans, I believe, as well. And yeah, my dad was just fascinated with this whole concept, and it came out really well. But it's a shame that. I guess it was a combination of the crash, the combination of nobody wanted to buy extra hardware, but...
That was it. I mean, Mattel was just too... They didn't have their mindset right yet. I mean, now plays are better. Mattel was, they made Barbies. They made them, and then you bought a Barbie, and then you bought dresses for Barbie. They're very hardware, tactile. And so for them, it was like, okay, we did this, and then we had this part on, and we had a voice thing, and then we can have this other thing. And, they were developing a new joystick controller would plug in. Codename Dandelion. They had all this stuff going on, and in 1983 they basically came in and cleared out all those people who liked the hardware. People like Staff Prodromo, who was the senior vice president of operations and everything. They cleared those people out and replaced with people who just were going to be software people. I said, this is what this is about now, is software. Because they had an Intellivision 3 and Intellivision 4. They had computers. They had everything. They had a ton of stuff. And that's why we lost so much money. It's like, we had all this, and you couldn't sell enough games, even though the interest in video games was growing. You couldn't sell enough games to cover that. And when you had so many other games in the market, and so there was a glut of stuff, and then most of that stuff was no good. Nobody liked playing it, and so it discouraged people from playing games anymore.
And also, I think the internals, the time we left, there were so many people. I think there was 1,000 people there, wasn't there, Keith, at that point, at the end of the company, and nobody knew what anybody was doing. They hired so many people so fast that it was just like this bunch of people, and I don't think a lot of the people had a clue of really barely what the business was.
Well, we had like 100 programmers in the application software department. But then the design and development group also had like about 20 programmers. And then we had about 20, 30 programmers in France developing games. And we had programmers in Taiwan developing games. So yeah, we had a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then, that was the second floor of the Mattel Electronics building. The first floor was filled with accountants.
Right.
And like you mentioned something about the controllers, the Intellivoice actually, at least the early ones, I don't think they all do, but they had a little expansion port that was like a pass through to the processor in the Intellivision.
Yeah.
And that was going to enable what sort of ideas were there? Was it anything beyond like wireless controllers or?
I remember them sending out a memo at one time saying, "Hey everybody, we want your ideas. If there could be a controller for this thing, other controllers, what would they be?" And they never did anything. I think all Intellivoices have that. I don't think
they do.
I thought so.
I'd heard somewhere that the later model ones they didn't have that underneath that flap if you lifted it up, but I'm not sure. I've not seen that myself. Everyone I've ever looked at has that little expansion thing.
It was only on the market for a year, so
yeah,
a little over a year. I can't imagine they went through different generations of the thing, but if there's some real fan out there who knows that they changed that,
let us know. Contact us. Let us know what you think.
But yeah, I don't know if they ever came out with any idea that, like I say, other than the wireless. But I had one that I thought was brilliant, but they never did it. Which is that I thought they should have controllers that had LCD readouts so that you could play something like poker and blackjack and not have to tell the other person, hide your eyes when you're looking at your card. It'd be there. That's when Sega Dreamcast came out. It had that. I said, that's brilliant. And the Sega Dreamcast went, well, I guess that's why I wasn't in charge. And the idea that I thought was really cool turned out to be a total bomb. But hardware doesn't drive anything. It's a problem. That's the problem. The Dreamcast was a good machine. You can have all these good machines. It's the software that sells it. The killer app. Right. That's what does it. It's like the Atari 2600. When it came out, it was woo, everyone was talking about, but it wasn't a big success. They didn't. I think they built 800,000 of them. And with their first Christmas, they sold 300,000. And so they said, this is going to be a flop. They actually shut down Atari Home. They were just going to do arcade games.
Wow.
And then Space Invaders came out. And it's like they'd already got it in development, so they were just going to clear out that. And everybody in the world wanted to play Space Invaders. And suddenly, all of those 800,000 went out of the warehouse. And they said, we got to make more of these. And so they make millions of it. So there were 12 million of these. But it was Space Invaders that drove it.
I remember that. It just was huge.
It was just the hardware.
Yeah.
Xbox, Nintendo, Atari, Sega, and PlayStation. Arcade games and pinball machines. GameGavel.com is your video gaming auction alternative.
Is out, second is first.
So let's talk a little bit more about specifics about Bomb Squad.
Yeah, the real history of it. Now, Joe, you and Kai Tran started, right?
Right.
Now, Kai was the programmer on it?
Yes, he was actually.
And you were doing all the creative stuff on it. And now, was the graphics done by Dave James?
I don't remember.
I think so.
It sounds right.
Yeah,
it sounds right.
Because that was before we actually had artists in the Intellivision department. So he was a guy in design and development, and I think he designed the whole the graphics ROM chip in the Intellivision. So I imagine he did it for that.
You know what I remember that I mention to people all the time is the way we used to do graphics. Like it was,
graph paper.
You have a paint program and you click on a color, but then we had this big, gigantic audio board that had like different shades of green, for instance, for green. And you take a pot that would be like a light green pot switch for those of you who aren't audio aficionados. And you take the light green switch and you'd move it to the right or to the left to get different shades of light green. You remember that?
Well, actually, I don't, because I don't think we had one of those at Mattel. I think they had it at APH. Were you doing that at APH or here? Because Mattel wouldn't pay for the development tools. APH tried to sell us all sorts of tools for.
Maybe it was. I don't remember where it was. I just remember that. When paint programs came out, I went, "Wow, look! There's no longer this gigantic board with different millions of different colors on it."
Yeah, we did have a board that you could do that, but I don't remember having colors in it. I'd have to talk to Peggy DeCarli, because she was the one who actually really got good at that thing at Mattel. But I don't remember having color. But I know they had a lot more development tools at APH.
I just remember, looking at people working on it, and it was like just amazing. I mean, amazing now. Then it wasn't amazing. Then it was like a tool that, we needed. But now it's like, whoa, that's like horse and buggy stuff.
Yeah. Well, that was the whole thing. When Mattel decided, hey, let's try doing a video game. Of course, there was nobody at Mattel who knew anything about video games. Richard Chang, the guy in charge of design and development, who wanted to do it, he went out and found the company APH out in Pasadena that was made up. The programmers were mostly just graduates from Caltech nearby. Their specialty was doing embedded software for, like, your washer and dryer has a computer in it. They did the software for things like that, or for the space shuttle has stuff in it, satellites have things in it. So they were specialized in that, where you were going to make, put a program into ROM. And they went to them, and they're the ones who did the operating system for the Intellivision, the first games and everything. And they developed these tools, and there was nothing like that at Mattel. So were you commuting back and forth to Pasadena for doing?
No, I just remember seeing it. So I went to their place a few times. I mean, we were working together, but not real intensely. And I just remember seeing that audio board, and I don't exactly remember where it was, but it must have been there.
The first programmers at Mattel, people like Mike Minkoff and Ray Kessler, they were actually going out to Pasadena and coming back. So they were on the road all the time, John Soule, until Mattel really started, building up a little program system, which they didn't have room anyplace. So half of it was in one area, half was another. Actually, not quite half, because there were some other people who were like upstairs in the big tower there. So there were three different areas of programmers within Mattel. So when you were doing this. So Kai Tran started it, but when did Gene Smith? Because when I came in October, it was Gene Smith.
He
was
may
really
have been the main programmer, because Kai was a programmer too, actually. But maybe he, I just remember working with him and looking at prototypes. As he was developing it, I was looking at what he was doing. So, and I sort of remember Gene, but I don't remember him as the main guy. All I really remember working with was Kai.
I think by the time that it really was set, Gene Smith kind of took over and was doing all of it. 'Cause I do remember Kai being around, but he was a design and development guy, and he never really transferred into the Intellivision programming. So I think that they got Gene to be the actual Intellivision guy, and Kai could go back to design and development.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So,
I don't think. I'm not quite sure Kai was a programmer. I didn't know what he was doing. All I remember was talking to him about working on the concept of it, and he went back and did whatever he did. I don't know.
Right.
I was just curious to ask if when you're developing these and working with multiple people, was it kind of a fight to like, oh, well, the game's going to need this much memory, so you only have this much for voice, but oh, no, I need more for voice?
No, actually it wasn't. Effort. I mean, it was kind of like we knew that there was like a minimum, although Keith mentioned about cutting down the script, but I really remember just we knew that there were 20 or 30 words and that the crucial thing was to make them a crucial part of the game. So and there were those limitations. So that's kind of why it made it fun and challenging. How could you do this? What words could you use that really would be influential in how you play the game? So there wasn't really like, hey, I want to like a writer. I mean, that would be a writer's man. There's not enough words. I need another 100 pages. But it wasn't really a writer battle. It was really a conservative. How can you conserve on saying words and still make the game work? So, it was there wasn't that kind of fight.
In the early days, they did have I mentioned APH where their program was done, and then when they started doing the voice, there was none of the voice equipment to record any of this, to do processing of the voice. So they're recording the voice here in Los Angeles, but then the tapes were going to New Jersey or wherever it was that General Instruments was, and they would do the processing and then send back the files, the data files, and all by putting in the mail or putting it on an airplane or something like that. They didn't have an internet at that time, or they didn't have it between General Instruments and Mattel. Yeah, so you'd have to and the usual thing where you can do something and try it. Here you could do something and then a week later find out if it works. So it really slowed down a lot of the stuff. But eventually, by the time they really got somebody, we had an in-house staff to do that.
You talked about the voice recording. Well, I had to prove that there was a guy, and I can't remember his name, who was like the AV guy at Mattel, and he was supposed to do the recording.
Ron Carlson. That would have been Ron Carlson, I think.
No, before. A guy who actually recorded the speak and spell voices.
Oh, geez, no.
Pardon?
I said before my time. Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah, I had to prove that they really couldn't do the stuff we needed, that we really needed a more professional, well, it's not professional, more just, I don't know what the deal was. So I had a parallel development. I gave him a task to record a voice and with these parameters. And I also went to Fred Jones actually and said, okay, let's try this and see who comes up with the best product. And so I had to prove that I couldn't use the in-house like Mattel guy, and we had to use this external guy, supplier, which turned out to be Fred to record the voices.
Excellent. And because we got a real state-of-the-art recording studio over at Mattel finally. It was really nice. Down the first floor of the building. Remember that building? Remember that recording studio they had there? That was great. Yeah. And it was filled with all the top equipment. The General Instance came out and installed all this great stuff for the processing. It was remarkable, the stuff they could do.
This was in that main Mattel building that used to be on.
No. It was actually in a building behind. It's where they've torn it down, but it's right now where the Home Depot is.
Right.
In Hawthorne. It was a 2-story building. It had been a warehouse. It was owned by Mattel, but they had been leasing it out, I think, to TRW. It was just a warehouse, and that's what they converted into being the Mattel Electronics building late in 1981.
Oh, okay.
It was right around Christmas 1981 where they actually formally split the company, so it was a separate incorporated company under the Mattel Incorporated banner. And so they moved us into this new building. They were actually working on the warehouse while we were working in there. They actually moved us in before the warehouse was finished. So we had like these wooden, creaky built stairs to get up into the lobby every morning. But it was really a great recording studio.
And just while we're talking about the different buildings, of course, the main building was torn down. Now it's a Ford dealership. Yes. But what about the building that's Fry's Electronics now? Wasn't that one of Mattel's buildings too?
Yes. That was the Jacquard building, because the company before that had first in there was a company called Jacquard. And I just sat empty for a while, and then Mattel moved. That's where Mattel moved all kind of like the corporate and the legal departments and everything down there. I
remember when we went to lunch in that big old building, I had to walk around Hot Wheels. People were racing them down the hallway. It was like, oh, can I get to lunch, or do I have to cross around 6 racetracks to get there?
Well, I think they were aiming for us, because it's true. When I think before we moved to our new building, they were stuffing us in all these little places in the traditional Mattel building, and we were located. Our division, the Mike Minkoff division, was located right next to the testing unit. And there were these women who were the most bored-looking women sitting on stools in the hallway, just like, and with the controllers controlling these radio-controlled cars. And we came out and started walking down the hallway. Those things started aiming for us. I think it was just for a little amusement for them. They're sitting there with a cigarette hanging out. You could smoke inside at that time, and they were just sitting there smoking and running cars around.
Nice.
And they were doing the CNC testing next door, because since these were just like spaces they could kind of fit us into, they didn't put finished walls in. They put walls that went up like maybe 8 feet or so, and then over that it was clear. So when they were testing a CNC, we were just sitting there going, "The bear says roar." It was like over and over again. It's like, oh great. The cow says moo. That's what we're listening to when we're working in the cubicles.
Nice.
So, but we finally got our own building. It was really, really great building.
Well, can you guys talk about any of the games that didn't come out for Intellivoice that were in development?
Well, the Woody Woodpecker thing. Well, and the space shuttle thing never came out, actually.
No,
right?
That was a game I wound up programming. The original programmer on it left the company. A guy named Boyd Hayes. He was working on it, and then he left, and so I took it over. Myself and Steve Roney, Stephen Roney, who's now the vice president of software development at Intellivision. He and I worked on that for a few months together to try to, and it really was going to be a great game. It's just that what we started with was not a game, and then we started turning it into a game. So it took longer than normally. If we just started from scratch, we probably could have done a lot faster. But we were just about getting to the point where we're just putting in the landing sequences and stuff when the company went out of business. But again, if you look at Intellivision Rocks, which you can buy now for $19.95, it actually has the video of it. We actually videotaped the game, and you can and synchronized it with the voice that had been recorded for it. So you can you can actually see like a little. I don't know how long it is, but a 3 or 4 minute segment of what it would have looked like. We did a very nice map showing the orbits because Steve was very adamant about making it all accurate, that if you take the space shuttle, up or down a little bit when it's flying, that will change its orbit, and then you can synchronize it with the or the speed or whatever. You can synchronize it with the satellite that you have to pick up and then deploy a satellite. So you had to deploy a satellite, and then you had to pick up a satellite, and then you had to come back to Earth, and it was very nice.
There was really a lot of potential with the Intellivoice that just never got tapped into because of the way things in the market just.
Well, I think from the beginning, had they said we want to do it as an enhancement, and if people had caught on to it as an enhancement, I think, like in the baseball one, I think that would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Make some of the games it wasn't. Maybe they could color coded them or something like that. If it's this, you have to have the Intellivoice. This one, it'll add some enhancement to it.
But didn't they sell like $22 million? Maybe that's nothing for them of Intellivoice games. I mean, because of their marketing power, not.
Well, I don't know what the final figure is. We could add it up. I know how much. I've got the figures back in the office of just how many of each one of those games sold. But I know that mine, Tron Solar Sailor, sold 90,000 copies, which is nothing compared to the top games of Mattel were all million sellers at that time. So there's like 1.3 million Astro Smashes, and then 90,000 Intellivoice are going to be a drop in the bucket. The games were more expensive. I think they were $45 retail, $44.95 retail or something for the voicing, I think. So yeah, you can multiply that all out and figure out what the sales were. But yeah, like you say, however much they sold was a drop in the bucket compared to what they needed to operate, and plus what they were investing in the new hardware coming out.
Yeah, and I believe there was some kind of an offer when I got Solar Sailor. I cut like the bottoms of 5 game boxes off and sent it in or something like that. I don't remember if it was free or
well, it's if you look at the B-17 bomber commercial that's on YouTube, there is the offer at the end. I forget exactly what the offer is. Buy an Intellivision now through May 31st, you get a free Intellivoice, or you buy an Intellivoice and you get a free game. I forget what it was.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
it was something or other. You got something free. But yes, they were trying to move those things because that's the whole thing. You have to build up that market, that base market with your originally the console, and then you have to get enough of the Intellivoice to be able to sell enough software to make it worthwhile. Because it's selling the software.
Did you work with Disney? I remember going to Disney as they were developing the thing, and I remember they were like, well, where is it? And they kept, the movie, you kept not being able to see cuts from it, or they were really slow in their development. But
yes, I had the script, I had the storyboards. See, the thing is that you had to keep going out and watching the film because, when movies being made, they change things. Like, for example, the character Bit, now. Bit is supposed to stay with Tron with Flynn from the time he meets him until the end of the movie. I've got the storyboards that shows them watching the MCP being destroyed and Bit's still flying around. But it was just too expensive because he was, computer generated, and they got rid of him. They just had him get caught in the recognizer robot when it crashed, and so that way they could not have to keep doing them for the rest of the movie. So there's a lot of things like that, and the one that really kills me was that I was looking at some stuff because they were always sending over like slides and things, and they sent over one thing that just had a little drawing of this little buggy thing, and I called up over there, and they finally said, oh yeah, that's a grid bug. And this was like a month before, maybe less than a month before the movie was released, and they had added this at the very last second. And if you watch the movie, it's just dropped in. It's just like they're going along on the Solar Sailor through the big game grid thing, and Yori says something like, "Watch out for those grid bugs. If they touch us, we're done for." And it's just like a 5-second drop in and an animation, which was not computer generated, it was hand animated by the Disney animation department of these grid bugs getting up point. And they were entirely in there because Midway was doing the arcade version of Tron, and they wanted something extra. They said, well, we need something here. And they came with this idea of grid bugs. And so they put it in the movie, and I didn't know about that. And so I found out about that like a month before my game is supposed to be finished. So I'm frantically putting grid bugs onto the grid because people are going to look at that. So they're going to play the midway game. They're going to watch the movie and they go, "Oh, there's no grid bugs in this game." So I'm at the last second trying to figure out how to put grid bugs in this thing. So you had to keep trying to find out what was going on. But yeah, they would send over I'd regularly get a package from them that had the latest slides and things like that of the movie. A lot of transparencies and stuff.
What about the that Magic Carousel game?
Yes. Well, that started out, just logically. Mattel's got those. Not speaking say the CNC. So you the round. You know those. Right? Yeah. You put it and you put the arrow toward the horse, and then you pull the little string out and let it go, and it spins around, and the horse says, "Nah." Anyway, so I thought, hey, why don't we do that for kids? We'll do a children's one, and it'll be interactive CNC. And so they started mocking that up and everything and trying to draw it. And the problem was that you can't really do a good circle on an Intellivision. It's not designed for that. It's like, different machines, and this is something you never get marketing to understand. Different machines are good for different things. Mm-hmm. And so the people at Mattel, they would see something on the Atari 2600 and say, hey, we need something like that. Mm-hmm. Say, well, the Intellivision is not good at that. We're not good at point of view games. We're not good at this. But so we're always trying to make it do such we couldn't. But this was a case where we're trying to draw a circle. And say, no, it's not good. And so, well, how else can we do it? And ultimately, they came up with the idea of the carousel, because then you could put it on the side and you could make it look like it's spinning around without ever showing it being circular. I thought it was very clever how we finally came up with it. And I'll take credit because I was a supervisor on that one, although it was actually Steve Ettinger and Joe Ferreira who actually came up with all of that. But yeah, a lot of people thought about it and tried it and figured out what to do. But essentially, it was just going to be an activity box for kids. And they got it, and it was really finished. It was ready to go. And then the marketing department says, hey, we can't sell a $45 video game that's going to be for ages 3 through 6. Who's going to buy that? And so they killed it.
I remembered, actually, I was working on a Muppet game. I was trying to figure out how we could do a game with the Muppets for a couple months, but then I think the deal with them and licensing their thing didn't work out. So we were working on that nobody probably ever knew about.
Well, there's a lot of things they tried to get. They tried to get McDonald's. They tried to get Garfield. They tried to get Peanuts. And we had a programmer. She was hired as a programmer. Really, she was just a great artist, Connie Goldman, who designed a lot of our best stuff. And she was really good with animation and designing characters. And so essentially, she was our go-to person that, hey, they want to try to get the license for Rocky and Bullwinkle. And so she would come in and create Rocky and Bullwinkle, just walking around. And that way they could do the presentation and say, hey, look at this. And they'd walk around, and Dave Warhol would put some music on it. And it'd great. And they did that for McDonald's, and they did that for, like I say, Garfield. They did that for a number of companies. And some of them, Mattel was just desperate for trying to come up with something. They actually went to Raid to get them to sponsor the little can in Buzz Bombers, which you don't spray Raid onto bees. It's like it didn't make any sense at all, really. But they tried to do that, and they kept trying to do these deals. Of course, they did the Kool-Aid Man, and of course on the Atari 2600 was the Chuck Wagon one, right? Something like that.
Chase the Chuck Wagon.
Yeah. So they were always looking for how can we spin it, how can we sponsor, how can we do more stuff like this, and so it's always playing with stuff like that. So Magic Carousel started out as CNC, went into that activity box thing. It was very nice. Now, see, the thing about the Muppets, and this is an interesting thing here because Joey mentioned the Muppets. The reason why the Muppets would be great is because kids love the Muppets, but so do adults. Mattel was always smart. When you designed a toy for kids, you had to put something in there that appealed to the adults. That was like a rule at Mattel. And so the thing about the activity box was, there really was. It's kind of cool if you're an Intellivision fan, but I don't see the average family, the mom and dad, wanting to see that game more than once or twice.
Right.
It's the animation is fun to see that. Because Joe Ferreira did some fantastic little drawings and animations in that thing, which is great. But ultimately, it's a kids game, and I don't know how much kids are going to play it. I don't know how much the adults want the kids to play it, and $45. So the marketing just said it's not here. It's not here. But we first released that one on Intellivision Rocks.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder, though, with all the licensing they did, why was there never any talk of let's make a Hot Wheels game or a Barbie game, or because it couldn't be graphically represented well enough?
No, it really was because, and jump ahead here, they did do a Masters of the Universe game.
Right,
which
I remember
was a
that.
Mattel
Yeah.
project. Again, Joe did the original, the Castle Grayskull and all that, and the people who worked on that and in management and everything, they came back and said, well, you know, of all the licenses, all the companies we've dealt with, the just worst people to deal with are Mattel. They just are terrible. They come in here, they're micromanaging every little color. They come and say, you can't make it that color. I said, we only have 16 to play with on the Intellivision. Well, it can't be that color, so you can't use red because it looks like blood and everything. So they, okay, we'll make it brown or something. And all these complaints, so it's really tough. And the thing was, I just think they, especially with Barbie, I mean, Barbie was there was a princess. They're not going to do anything to sully her reputation. So they wanted to keep as much control over her as possible. And at that time, when we were at Mattel, at that time, they'd never allowed anybody to portray Barbie. You know, there weren't people going out and all that. And they started that during the 1980s. They actually had little pink cars for real cars. I remember them parking in front of our building one time, a convertible Stingray and a girl actually playing the part of Barbie. They'd never allowed that for sounds like 1955 when the Barbie was invented. Up until 1982, they'd never allowed certain things with Barbie in terms of that. And so the idea of actually having her go into a video game was going to be that I think that it was probably, I'm sure it was talked about. And I'm sure, I mean, the Hot Wheels such a...
Do you know the name, the real handler daughter, was her first name Barbie?
Yes.
Because she owned a linen store in Venice, and I really wanted to see the real Barbie. So one day I got up enough courage to go to that store because I was and then I know she didn't look anything like what the doll looked like. So I went to the store and she wasn't in that day, and that was I didn't have any courage to go back and really see what she looked like.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the Chandlers had 2 children, or they might have more, but I think they did have a girl named Barbara, and they had a boy named Ken. So it's like it's a little weird. These dating couple here is actually based on a brother and sister, but
that's a little creepy. Yeah.
But no, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. Elliot Handler passed away, and I went to the funeral of that. I'd actually had lunch with Ruth and Elliot Handler.
Wait, who passed away?
Elliot Handler.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So
wow.
I went to his funeral and the reception afterwards, and so I talked to Barbara there a little bit.
Oh, you did meet her. Okay.
Yes. Oh, yes. I met her. And
did you meet her before? That was the first time.
No, that's the first time I met her. So I didn't talk to her much. It was like not
right.
not exactly the spot to sit there and start. Hey, tell me about these stories. Hey, when you were a little girl. Hey, no, it's like, and you guys. I mean, the reason why Mattel took off like crazy is at the time television advertising wasn't really that, and especially for children, there wasn't really a lot of children's advertising. And Mattel came in and sponsored the Mickey Mouse Club. For the first year, they were like the only commercial of the Mickey Mouse Club, and that's what sent Mattel through the roof initially. Was that they were just brilliant with the marketing. Yeah, and then that was a funny thing. I had lunch years ago with Ruth and Elliot Handler, and just by the time lunch was finished, Elliot Handler is a really brilliant guy with his stuff, but Ruth Handler is the one who's really driving this thing.
Oh wow!
She was just pushing stuff through. It was like just. You could really tell that, had it been a different era when she had risen, she would have been the CEO of Mattel.
Oh wow!
She really had the personality for that.
Well, when you're talking about Mattel being really fussy and nitpicking, I used to work as a stage manager, and I did a number of Hot Wheels commercials and Barbie commercials. And I remember when Mattel would come in for that, they would take like double what they normally booked for. And I remember like an entire day of shooting, and they were coming in and they're looking at the playback and they're going, Barbie just looks a little bit too dark. I think we need to reshoot everything we did today. Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, but so it's a combination of that. One thing that that we didn't want to deal with them, and I think that they didn't want to really deal with us. They wanted to have full control over Barbie and Hot Wheels, because I know they tried to get the Hot Wheels onto the auto racing game. But then there was a lot of other, the Mattel licenses weren't the only ones. They really thought they were going to get the Battlestar Galactica license for Space Battle, and in fact that's why they look the way they do. Yeah, still look like Cylon fighters. Mattel thought they were getting light. It wasn't just Mattel Electronics thought they would, hey, yeah, we're going to get those Mattel. We're going to get Hot Wheels. We're going to get auto racing from the beginning. This will be the Hot Wheels game. I don't know what the discussions were where it fell through, but they lost that. And they also had a lot of other ones too, because Battlestar Galactica, they were working on getting that license. They were very positive they're going to get. They had the rights on toys. They were actually making little Battlestar Galactica toys in the toy department. So they were sure they were going to have it for electronics, but they didn't. But that's why the Cylons still look like Battlestar Galactica. That's what it's designed to be. And they thought they were going to get Star Wars. They were sure, oh yeah, we're going to get that Star Wars thing. But they didn't get that. But that's why the trench in Star Strike was really going to be the Death Star in the trench. That's where the development had already started on that. You look at the early. I have the early stuff from APH when they're working on the game. It is called Star Wars. They started it before they actually had the license. They started working on it, assuming they'd get the license along the way.
Well, and in Space Spartans, the enemy ships look like Darth Vader's TIE fighter,
Yeah.
I mean, was there supposed to be a tie-in with that game originally?
I don't know. No, I don't believe there was at all. I just think that was just... To a large degree, Space Spartans kind of started off as, let's take Space Battle and add voice to it. They had a lot more features to it, but essentially that's what you've got.
Yeah.
And so I think they were kind of inspired by it, and said, hey, looked good for that. Let's do Star Wars in this one. I'd have to ask Steve Roney and Bill Fisher, who did the game. Actually, there were so many people started working on Space Spartans because the people who first started working on it left the company. In fact, I think Brian Doherty was. I'd have to look at my own notes on the thing, but the first two people who were working on it, they left, and then Mike Minkoff was working on it, and then he was promoted, and so then Steve Roney and Bill Fisher actually did the game. But I just think that they were at that time they were inspired by Star Wars. Yeah, so I don't know if there was ever any tie-in going to happen. I don't believe there ever was, and I don't think they ever said, "Hey, let's make it look like this." I think when they're designing it, they say, "Hey, let's watch. Hey, that would be a good design. Let's try that." I think they just used Star Wars as inspiration, in the same way that Joey Silvian used the movie Juggernaut to help out with Bomb Squad. See how I brought it back to Bomb Squad there?
Yeah,
nicely done.
It was clever,
good
wasn't
time.
it? Yeah,
professional. So Joey, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about the production of Bomb Squad, or any things you ran into, or memorable little stories about it, or
Did you get any feedback when it came out?
No, actually I didn't. I never heard anything, but nothing really. I just one of the really my experience was what was Gracie Lance, the Woody Woodpecker. I was impressed with her and working with her, but yeah, nothing. I think we covered kind of a gamut of voice games and kind of how they worked and what kind of the development with the scripts and the voice recording and all the different aspects of.
I'll tell you one story about Bomb Squad, and this is on the website, so everyone may have already heard this story, but. The inventory that was left over when Mattel Electronics went under was bought by a company that really INTV Corporation spun out of. It wasn't really the same company, but they were always trying to still sell off. They had a little bit of inventory left off. They're still trying to find a place to sell it. And one day, the three guys who were kind of running the executives, they were actually congratulating themselves for their great sales job they'd just done. They had managed to sell like all the remaining inventory, like 20,000 copies, thing, in Mexico, where the Intellivoice had never been done. There was never a Spanish version of Intellivoice. You can't play Bomb Squad without the Intellivoice, but they had managed to sell them all to a store, to a chain of stores in Mexico, and they're congratulating themselves. They just.
Oh, that's
so I apologize to all the little, the Mexican children who grew up traumatized by this game.
Yeah, no clue what was going on.
Yeah, exactly. You can't play that game without the voice.
Oh man, that's funny.
Yeah. So, but it's sad. It's sad at the same time to cheat all those kids. But they were very proud of themselves. High five. Hey, we sold. We got rid of those. Because I don't think I had any more.
Cartel game.
What?
A cartel game.
Yeah.
That's a little early for that, but still.
Yeah, right.
Well, they made up their own story because they didn't have voice, so they made up their own thing and became that. So I think they were out of Intellivoice units, so they couldn't sell it to the countries that.
Do you know how many Intellivoice units they made?
I do have the figures at the office. I want to say about 150,000. It might have been more than that. It was definitely less than 300,000. Do
you know how much it cost to manufacture one Intellivoice unit?
I really don't know. I don't know the cost of these things.
Yeah, I mean, it's all a matter of scale and how many they made. But
I mean, technically,
were they losing money on the sales? Is kind of what I'm getting at.
Well, technically, and of course that doesn't mean anything. But technically, the laws in the United States, an FTC law, you're not allowed to sell something below its cost.
Uh-huh.
Unless it's a closeout or something like that, you can't create something and sell it for what its because that's just kind of predatory, because then you could be driving other companies out of it. We got plenty of money, so we're going to sell these PCs here for $1.50 each and drive everybody else out of business and say, okay, now we're going to raise the price to $3,000. So the government didn't allow you to do that. You have to show that you're at least selling it for a little bit more than your cost of making it. But that doesn't mean the companies don't do it.
Right.
Especially Mattel. I remember when I was sent over to France to do some work, one of the guys at Mattel came to me with some circuit boards. Could you put these in your luggage when you go over there? Why did you send them over there? Well, Mattel's got a lot of red flags when we go through customs. so they asked me to smuggle stuff into France for them. It's like, are you kidding me? So I'm not sure. And again, allegedly, I don't want Mattel coming after me too here.
Right.
So I have no proof
Gotcha.
that Mattel ever sold anything for less than its real price, for less than its retail.
Right.
Actually, Mattel would have done that anyway, because they're wholesaling. So, but they never wholesaled it for less than price, and they never ever intended to smuggle anything into France. And that was not Mattel Toys. I mean, Mattel Electronics, a company that no longer exists.
There you go. Big separation there.
Yes, indeed. Anything wrong, anything that Mattel is mad about right now, Mattel Electronics did that, and those guys are all in jail and dead. I'd like to ask one more thing about Joey. The voices, though, in the Bomb Squad, those guys were guys from Firesign Theater.
Yeah, right. Proctor and.
Now, were you a fan of Firesign Theater, or did you just put out a voice call and these are the guys who showed up, or what?
You know what? I think it really. Fred had a relationship with them, and he had used them for other things. So he suggested them that we audition them. So then I picked them once we saw them. So I didn't really. I mean, I knew about them and I'd heard their records.
Mm-hmm.
I love the titles of their records.
Yeah.
I'd never really, met them till he suggested them and they came in. So.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, they did. Well, we can't call him Boris, but the character Boris in Bomb Squad, they'll never do it in time, and it's like, the Boris Badenoch character, because we didn't have a license to do that.
Right.
But yes, he sounded exactly like Boris. Which, to bring it all around again, Boris Badenoch's voice, Paul Frees. We were talking about earlier.
Nice.
So I'll just bring it all together here.
Perfect.
And Natasha was June Foray, and so anyway, and then also the voices in B-17 Bomber. A couple of them are Firesign Theater people also.
Yeah, we used them in actually 2 or 3 games. I rotated. I mean, you just picked the ones that were the best for each of the things, but and then that I had tried to hire them for that other thing, but
right. And let's not say that one either right now for lawsuit purposes.
Right, yeah.
Why that one fell through.
Right.
But yeah, so I'm just wondering about the voice, because I remember I was there for one of the auditions where just, for Yori, I was there for the audition for Yori for Tron Solar Sailor, and just like all of these, we had like 20 people come in to read little things like, get off, we have to get off, things like that. Yeah. It's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. It was a very, after all the auditions and after all the recordings, and then we get 30 words, which is,
total. And then so for the actress who funded Yuri, she got like maybe 6 words in the whole thing.
Oh
right.
My gosh.
And, we may have recorded her for a day or something like that.
Wow.
And the people that process the voice, and that, the whole process was pretty amazing for what we had to go through to just get those 20, 30 words.
Yeah. And next time you can do a show here about why did Mattel Electronics lose $385 million in 1982, I think was the figure.
There are some clues in this episode, I believe.
$385 million, I believe, was the loss.
Wow. Okay.
The stockholders were not amused.
I imagine not.
Yeah, I think we should mention here, because you've got me in here talking about it, and you've got Joey in here talking about it. It's like, well, why don't we have like these programmers talking about, where's Gene Smith and all this? Well, the Gene Smith, who was, I think, the primary programmer on the thing, he passed away a few years ago. And Russ Lieblich, who did the music, he passed away a few years ago. And Peter Bergman, Bergman did Boris?
I think it was Bergman.
Anyway, he passed away just like a month ago.
They all mold together because I did so many.
He was one of the Firesign Theater guys who did voices for us, and he passed away. So, so we've lost 3 of the people who were key people on that game. And I don't want to say there's a curse associated with it, but watch out, Joey.
Yeah, I know. We already went through this. I think I've put enough positive vibes to live for a few more minutes till at least through till tomorrow morning. At least I think. We'll see if you guys read the obituaries then, and I'm gone. Then you'll know it's the bomb squad curse.
But because Gene was a great guy to work with. Gene, after he did Bomb Squad, he was such a sharp programmer that when I was doing Tron Solar Sailor, the game was bloated. The game was over the 12K that I think that I had, maybe 16K. I think it was 12K. It was far over that. 16, 17K was going on here. And so I needed to cut like 5K out of it. Rather than take my time to do it, they wanted me to keep creating the thing. And they brought Gene in kind of like to sweep up after me. So I would come in and he would be looking at the code. He'd say, why did you do it this way? This. Do whatever you want, as long as it looks the same. So Gene was doing a lot of cleanup on my program because I was just doing stuff fast, down and dirty. And then he was coming in and like fixing it up. So it was a great guy to work with. And we had a lot of pranks there, joking around, because you weren't supposed to be able to go into the data files and start cutting up the voices and everything, but he did. He figured out how to do it. So we were able to do like fake games that people who have been on the website know about.
Space.
I wasn't going to say it. I wasn't going to bring it up. I did not find that necessary, and I want to apologize to anybody listening to this.
We'll edit that out. It's okay. Tommy Tallarico already talked all about space in his interview.
Did he explain how it came about?
He did not.
Oh, here's how it came about. It's because there's a line in the movie Tron, and Joey, you put it in the script, which I can't allow this. Right. And they got a guy coming in, and he comes out, I can't allow this. And they tested it. They tested fine. As soon as I heard it, and Gene is in my office, we're sitting there listening to it, and we both look at each other. What did he say? I can't allow this. And so Gene started cutting it down so he could isolate the word. He comes into my office one day, and he starts. And say, that's right. And then I mocked up a title screen, and we cut out space from Space Spartan. So Mattel Electronics Intellivoice TV. And it was like. And so we're laughing like little 12-year-olds in there, and then we actually took Astro Smash and changed the graphics to make all the graphics obscene.
Except that you were shooting recognizers too, which weren't really obscene, but they were in there.
I don't know why. I think we called them. I think they were close enough to something or other. Called IUDs or something. I forget what. No, I guess the spinners were that. Anyway, yeah. So we just were playing with that. It was it wasn't a big project. Something like afternoon work on it. Something.
Oh,
like
that's classic.
But yeah, so we did that just to kind of bring back in one of the voice people. And say, hey, you tested this, right? Yeah. And do you hear anything here? And I played it. No, I can't allow this. I hear that. Well, you don't hear this. And so then I actually put the other one in, and she looked at it and was like, she turned gray and ran out of the
office. That's great. I always wondered how that came about.
Yeah, it was not our intention to do it. It was just that we were given this word, and we were just doing to make a point.
Gotcha.
There was no harm, a harmless college prank, not intend to offend anyone. That's the disclaimer we put on everything.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, guys. And it's been a pleasure.
Welcome.
And,
had a great time. I love talking about the old days.
Yeah, well, there's plenty more we can talk about in other games another time, too.
The code. Figure out the code. Are you sure? One good going. You did it. You're a hero. They'll be looking for us.
So, yeah, just as we're kind of finishing things up, one of the things I probably should have mentioned earlier when we talked about INTV Funhouse's writing, in his little quick review of it, he says Bomb Squad does a good job of taking a basic guess the number game and building a fun game around it. As a kid, I never thought of it like that. I definitely had played guess the number games on calculators and stuff like that, higher, lower. but yeah, I guess at its core, you're guessing a number. But there's a lot more to it than that, of course.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear some of the things that Joey talked about when they came up with the concepts and the idea for the game.
Before we go any further, did you guys write down a score?
I didn't write anything down.
I put a score down.
Okay.
This actually would be in one of my top 10s. I don't know where I would put it because I think my top 10, I can't really place any as a 1 or a 2. But I really love this game. And yeah, I think out of all the games for the Intellivision, this is one I'd love to see remade. This and Treasure Retirement are ones I'd love to see remade for the next generation. The closest we've had in the past 10 years or so was a game called Smart Bomb on the PSP. And yeah, I wrote down some of my scores as I was playing, and my level 1 with 3-digit score ended up being 6,560 points. My level 2 was only like 4,080.
I only wrote down one score on level 2 doing 3 digits. I got 7,700.
Okay.
But again, I mean, as a kid, I don't think I ever thought about the scoring. You know,
I never did either.
It's just definitely a game that you beat or don't beat was kind of the way I looked at it.
Yeah, as a kid, I don't even remember realizing there was a score necessarily.
Right.
You either save the city or blow it up.
Mm-hmm. and if you go on Intellivision Productions, Intellivision Live's website, they talk about a few bugs and fun facts, and Keith touched on some of those already, but there's definitely more information on there if you want to take a look at that, intellivisionlives.com.
Yeah, you guys both put it in your top 10, and I said I didn't. I do think it's a game I'll go back to. It's definitely still very enjoyable, but I think that I need to get a break from it for a while and then go back to it again.
Yeah.
So that's Bomb Squad. Not much more to say about that. I think it's like, you know, well, we've already talked about it. It's a good game. Try it out. So next month we're going to dig into Dreadnought Factor by Activision.
This game was requested by VIP, Benjamin Sterling, again, not his real name. He is the guy who does our graphic logo stuff for the podcast. He is a big fan of this game. I'm a big fan of this game, so it'll be our first Activision title.
And I have never played it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Awesome.
I didn't have it when I was a kid.
Nor did I.
But found out about it once I started collecting, and it highly recommended. Well, should I give the review already? It's
Rick hates it. It sucks.
It's
don't listen to the episode.
Really,
listen to 2600 Game by Game. That's a better show anyway.
It's another one of these. It's another of these great games that's kind of like you really kind of think it's trying to be something else, but it didn't get the rights to say it's something else, and so
yeah,
it's real fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. I've played it recently, but not that recently. So it'll be good to dig that one out again.
Yeah.
So if anyone listening, if you have any Bomb Squad stories or any Dreadnought Factor stories, let us know. hello@intellivisionaries.com or hello@indiepodcast.com. Hit us up on Facebook, Indie Podcast, Twitter, @IndiePodcast. And, of course, we are always available on the forums of Atari Age and Retro Video Gamer and our own forums on Game Gavel. So we're also available on the Throwback Network. Wanted to give those guys a mention. Like-minded retro-themed podcast. Check them out. Of course, you can find us on iTunes and Stitcher. You know that already. You're listening right now. So thanks for joining us for episode 5. We will see you again next month for episode 6.
You've been listening to the Intellivisionaries podcast. Intellivision is a trademark of Intellivision Productions.
They'll never go in hide.
Have you had enough of Intellivision yet? This is Intellivision.
You have just seen a demonstration of Mattel Electronics Intellivision. In the next several years, you will see its hardware components and software library grow in number and dimension to provide even higher levels of service to the consumer.
And what do you think, Odyssey 2? Yes, I'll have to come up with a creative Odyssey 2 thing there, if I remember. If I forget that edit point, that's going to be embarrassing. I should be writing this down. Yeah, anyway.
Oh, no.